In the serene illusion of my marriage, I uncovered a storm. My wife, Rose, had been unfaithful for years, each affair a devastating blow. When her latest lover confessed, my world collapsed. Determined to unveil every lie, I hired investigators and uncovered the depth of her deceit. Fueled by rage, I crafted a meticulous plan for revenge. No longer the man she thought she knew, I became her greatest fear. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a tale of relentless retribution. This is my story. Watch it unfold. Rose sang along to a song that was almost 30 years old, playing on her favorite oldies radio station. It was a song from when she was 18, right on the edge of becoming an adult. She remembered hearing it the first time she and Charley were together. Her smile grew as she pictured them, both 18 and ready for anything. Truthfully, that summer was not about love, but about excitement. They found ways to sneak away to have fun almost everywhere they could find a flat surface and some privacy. One of her best memories was of lying on a quilt spread over hay bales in a barn. The full moon shone through the open doors, lighting up their faces as they enjoyed each other again. Afterward, they cuddled under the quilt and watched a fox walking through the meadow and listened to an owl hooting, perhaps upset because they were in its space. But every summer turns to fall and they both headed off to college. Charley went to a local university to study agribusiness, while Rose attended a college 3 states away on a full scholarship for accounting. Their paths crossed again briefly the next summer, but after that, she focused on internships every summer until she graduated. She finally came home when she received the best job offer from the biggest bank in town. Even though they lived in the same place, they did not see each other for 2 years. That changed when Charley got involved in a business deal at her bank. There was little talk about his career path since his family owned 4 of the largest farms around and a big store that supplied farms with feed, seeds, and fertilizer. He eventually became the assistant manager there. When Charley's father passed away from a heart attack a year later, Charley inherited everything, including a large life insurance payout and his father's share of the business. After the deal was done, Charley no longer had a part in the farms, but he owned the feed store and a small section of land that had been in the family for over 200 years. He also got a good sum of money, which he quickly used to buy another store farther away and added a hardware store at both locations. With his knowledge and hard work, he made a lot of money, earning 3 times what he would have as a farmer. His cousins were not happy, but since they had agreed to the plan, they had to live with it. Rose was assigned to work with Charley at the bank, and they rebuilt their friendship over the months. They started going out for lunch, then dinner, and eventually began spending the night together. No one was surprised when 18 months later, in a small country church where his family had worshipped for generations, Rose became Mrs. Charley Barton on a warm April day. Their honeymoon was at a fun resort where they could go without clothes. They returned home with many happy memories and no tan lines. Charley then surprised Rose with a special gift: the money to start her own office, with his businesses as her first clients. The agreement also stated that he wouldn't take any profits from her work. This was something his family had made sure of when he bought the stores, so if he ever married and got divorced, they could buy the stores back easily. Charley didn't mind at that time since he and Rose weren't serious yet, and he wanted to make sure she had a good deal too. Years later, Rose had 8 offices in 2 states and traveled a week each month to manage them. She was not just an accountant anymore, she was now the CEO. Charley owned 4 stores with an income of over $1 million each year, and her earnings were about half of that. This was a lot of money for their small town, where the main city had only 40,000 people, and the next town was a tiny place with just over 6,000, not far from their home. She chuckled as the song ended. They were known as the redneck elite in their community, doing well without being snobby. They belonged to a country club but did not act like typical country club members. She drove into the driveway of their 4-bedroom home and sighed, thinking of how they hadn't been able to fill it with children. There was a problem during the birth of their daughter, and she could no longer have kids. Instead, they poured their love into their only child, making sure she grew into a smart, responsible person. Their daughter had just graduated from college, leaving the house feeling empty for the first time. As Rose walked through the stone hallway, her heels clicked on the floor. Shoes were her one big treat since they became rich. She guessed she had 60 pairs of heels, and her annual shopping trip was coming up. Each year, she traveled to Atlanta, Charlotte, and twice to Miami to refresh her wardrobe, which mostly meant buying new shoes. She always took her mother and daughter, who was more excited about it now than when she was younger. Charlie usually wore clothes from his hardware stores, but he had nice suits for special occasions. He weighed only 15 pounds more than when they married, and Rose had actually lost weight, thanks to working with personal trainers. As she walked to the kitchen, she thought about how they were well off, still good-looking, had a wonderful child, and life seemed perfect. Thursday was takeout night, and her nose told her it was Chinese, her favorite. Next week would be Italian, barbecue, burgers from the small diner in the next town, fish, or something from a new place that had just opened. Rose found it strange that the food was still in boxes and that Charlie was sitting outside watching the sunset. She grabbed a couple of plates and loaded them up, carrying them to the table, where she noticed he already had a glass and a pitcher of sweet tea. She took another glass and some utensils and sat down next to him, surprised he hadn't kissed her. When she leaned in to greet him, he turned his head so she only caught his cheek. Worried, because that was not like him, she asked about his day. He kept looking over the fields and replied, "It was pretty boring in the morning, but I had an interesting lunch date." Rose smiled. People often wanted something from Charlie. A 14-year-old girl wanted him to speak to her group, and an 80-year-old retired librarian asked for a donation so he could have his name on a building. Charlie usually treated them to lunch while they talked. He was often steady in his work, but sometimes he had moments of weakness. One time, a bright 10-year-old suggested he help start a school garden by donating equipment, seeds, and his time. He was impressed by her idea, so he leased a field next to the school and divided it so every class had a plot. Then he sent over tillers and tools, along with 2 retired farmers to help with the project. They did only what the kids couldn't do and showed them how to take care of the garden. Each class had to vote on what to plant and when to plant it. Every student needed to spend at least 1 hour a week working on it. All the harvest went to the school cafeteria, where they made meals using vegetables grown by the students. Unusually for someone who sold farm chemicals, he only allowed them to use organic materials. The program started 10 years ago, and the girl who suggested it was now working alongside the retired farmers as part of her college requirements. Charlie had paid for all her schooling and expenses. It wasn't a hidden scholarship. He simply said, "I believe in you," and arranged the finances. In return, she agreed to work for him for 4 years after graduating. She now called him Uncle Charlie. Charlie was kind, but not a saint. He could be abrupt to people who annoyed him and had no patience for dishonesty in business or personal matters. He seldom got angry, but when he did, he could be tough both in public and private. He never forgot a kindness, but he also remembered slights. Someone must have upset him during lunch, she thought as she relaxed. Woe to them, as their preacher would say. Was she pretty, or was it some grumpy old man asking for money? She was quite attractive. Amanda Peterson. Suddenly Rose felt a chill, worried about who he had lunch with and how he sounded. His voice was soft but sharp, which she recognized from past experience. He got up and walked to the end of the patio, looking at the small lake he had built. "What did you talk about?" she asked. "Sex." "Sex? Why would a 24-year-old woman talk to you about sex?" He turned to her, looking straight in her eyes. Her heart raced as she listened carefully. She and Bobby are going to have an open marriage. It was his idea, and he spent weeks convincing her. She wanted to know if I would be her first partner since I was so understanding of our own open marriage. She thought I would be gentle with her. We spoke for a long time, Rose. The girl is confused and scared, but by the end she was more angry than scared. You should tell Bobby to be careful, and you need to watch yourself too. If even a tiny part of her story is true, we are done. Do you understand? Absolutely done. I will find every secret you've ever had since you were a kid. Now is your chance to defend yourself. Go ahead. Rose sat in shock, struggling to understand what had just happened. No, not now. How could this be? Bobby said she was okay with it. Charlie stayed quiet for about a minute, then said, "I'm leaving now. I'll stay at the farm for a while. Don't try to contact me in any way. We'll talk when I'm ready. I can't believe you did this." Rose didn't know how long it took her to move, but by then she could hear his truck driving away. She sat down again, staring at the plates of food, too stunned to cry. 2 hours later, the takeout was ruined, covered in flies. The sunset had disappeared, replaced by a cloudy night. "I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that." The boy almost dropped the milkshakes when she leaned over to grab hers, causing a little surprise. On the way home, he playfully teased her with the cold cup, splashing it on her. They didn't get inside the house before he lowered the truck's tailgate, making it easy for her to sit. The next morning, they woke up smelling like vanilla shakes. The town where her new office was located was much bigger than her hometown. She decided to give herself a treat by going out for the night. She took a cab so she didn't have to worry about drinking too much, and ended up at a show with only male performers. The drinks, the attractive men, and her own feelings took over, and she took one dancer back to her hotel. He was young and full of energy. The next morning she felt sore and embarrassed. What if Charley found out? She didn't go out again that week and fell into Charley's arms when she got home, asking him to take the next day off. They were together in a mix of guilt and desire. It took her a long time to calm down. The following week, she found herself back at the same show and ended up with the same dancer again. She played with him for 3 months, giving him small gifts and money for their outings. She always put money back on his card before seeing him, so it would be full for their dates. He quit his job but gave her a few intense days before introducing her to another dancer. Things didn't go well with him. They spent a Monday together, and by Wednesday he called to say another girl had given him something. She panicked and got checked for health issues, even though nothing showed up. She called Charley, telling him she found a serious problem at work and had to stay longer. Lying to him made her feel terrible, especially because she was worried about her health. She promised herself not to do it again. But 6 months later, she broke that promise and continued to stray for the next 8 years. Eventually, Charley found out. If she had to describe Bobby Peterson in one word, it would be handsome. He was tall and fit, and she couldn't help but notice his confidence. For the first time, she thought about cheating at home. The years of hiding her flings made her overconfident. She planned to make Bobby her assistant and only get close when she was away. The flirting began, and she noticed he was full of himself. She suspected he wanted her for her money, which amused her. He would never be as good a man as Charley. Bobby was just a fun distraction until he grew dull. She planned to let him down easy when the time came, giving him nice gifts and maybe some cash. If he became a problem, she would remind him how costly that could be. Things began to unravel when his wife discovered their emails. How could he be so careless? She realized she should have ended it there, but he convinced her he could handle his wife. She didn't know his true plan until everything crumbled, and unexpectedly, Amanda Peterson offered herself to Charley. Rose paused, lost in thought as she combed her hair. Did she still want to be with Charley? Was it time to move on? Her love life hadn't been exciting lately, but Charley felt safe, like an old friend. When they were together, he put in a lot of effort to please her. Maybe, a small voice whispered, she should have held back some of her passion for her flings. Yes, she thought, she wanted to stay married to Charley. He was her true partner, the one she wanted beside her forever. Life without him seemed unappealing. She needed him to understand that others were not a threat. They were just distractions until she returned to him. She had to try. Charley drove into the driveway of his farm, admiring the old 2-story house on the hill. When he bought it, it needed a lot of work, and he thought about tearing it down. Instead, he chose to fix it up, adding many improvements. It took 3 years because he had just started his business and couldn't do everything at once. Rose was busy setting up her new office, paying little attention to his projects. Charley realized this was how their relationship was. Rose focused only when it was about her. He felt a bit let down when he showed her the house, and all she said was, "It looks nice." He had considered making it their home, but by then his business was thriving, and Rose wanted to build something new for them and the family they hoped to have. Rose wanted to wait for her office to do well, but when they finally made money, she stopped taking her birth control pills. They had waited to marry until they were 26, and now at 28, Rose said they should start having children soon. not wanting to be having babies at 35. They planned for 3 kids, but after Faith was born, complications led her to have her tubes tied. Charley wanted more from life and even suggested adoption, but Rose quietly changed the subject until he gave up. He thought his daughter, Faith, was perfect. As Rose got busier with her business, Charley spent more time with Faith. He really hated leaving her at daycare. He had 5 women working for him full-time at the store, along with 4 more part-time. There were 18 men working in the commercial area, mainly as drivers and in receiving. When he built a new building next to the store, most people didn't pay much attention since he was always expanding. Many thought it would be an office. When it was finished, he gathered all of his workers for a meeting. "I know you all have been wondering about the new building. It's a daycare center for Barton Enterprises. It will not be open to the public. It's just for employees." His workers were shocked, especially when he took them on a tour. The center could hold 50 children and had a big outdoor playground and a fully equipped kitchen, all brand new. One woman, already stressed by childcare costs, asked what the fees would be. He smiled. "Well, it's completely free for you, but you will get an employee discount." It took a moment for them to understand. Then they started crying. Some of the men even wiped their eyes. Charley was effectively giving them a big pay raise each week, but his main reason was to keep Faith close. He hired 4 women to care for the children along with part-time cook. He gave the cook clear instructions on the meals and snacks. They needed to taste good, be healthy, and come from local sources. They were to use as few pre-packaged items as possible. Soon, employees wanted to eat with their kids, so he had to extend the cook's hours and add more tables. When the meals reached 60, he hired her an assistant. Many people ate outside on nice days, at tables under the trees. Surprisingly, about half of the meals were vegetarian and no one complained. He hired skilled caregivers, and while they played with the kids a lot, they also taught them. By the time many kids went to public school, they could read and write already, knew some basic Spanish, and had good study habits. The kids, known as the Bartonians, stayed close friends and supported each other throughout their lives. They also helped improve the school's performance ratings every year. Good manners were taught early, so words like please, thank you, and you're welcome became second nature for them. When other stores learned about the daycare, Charley set up similar programs for them. He spent about $400,000 a year to keep them running, all from his own money, but he got a nice tax break in return. All of this was to keep Faith happy and close. He unlocked the door and decided to open some windows for fresh air. The breeze felt nice, so he left them open for the night. He usually didn't drink much, but he remembered to buy a 12-pack of beer, some coffee, creamer, and a few snacks. He put everything in the kitchen, stared at the beer for a moment, and then made a cup of coffee. He carried his cup outside, sitting in the porch swing and gently rocking back and forth. He suddenly remembered cuddling with Rose on that same swing right after they finished the house. They were happy, laughing, and looking at the barn. They had made great memories there. He smiled at the thought, then leaned back and wondered if there were any signs that could have shown him his marriage was over. Looking back, he couldn't find anything that stood out. Then he remembered some happy smiles from Rose. When he had asked about them, she said she was reliving a nice memory but never shared what it was. Was she thinking about someone else? His thoughts were interrupted by his phone ringing. He had forgotten to turn it off. Just as he was about to do that, he noticed the number. "Hello?" He heard crying on the other end before a woman shouted that someone had hit her. "Amanda," he said in a serious voice. "Who hit you?" "My husband. I told him about our lunch and that I wanted to leave him. He lost it and punched me in the face. What should I do?" "Are you out of the house?" She tearfully confirmed she was in her car. "Good. Now listen to me. Drive straight to the hospital. I'll be there as fast as I can. Do it, Amanda, if you want my help. Go now." He hung up, happy he chose coffee instead of beer. Once in his truck, he called the sheriff's office on the non-emergency line. He spoke with the senior officer and was told a female deputy would be there when he arrived. He barely beat the patrol car to the parking lot. Amanda jumped out of her car and rushed over to him and the deputy. The whole left side of her face was swollen, and her eye was completely shut. A small trickle of blood was coming from a corner of her mouth. They helped her into the emergency room, and Charley waited for 40 minutes until the deputy came back out. She was a Bartonian, one of the original employees. He's broken her cheekbone, Charley. She wants to talk to you before she presses charges. What's going on? Charley shrugged and told her a slightly different story. I had lunch with her today. I think she needed someone to talk to. Her husband wanted to involve her in a swinging relationship, and I gave her advice I don't think he liked. Carla Martinez laughed. Swingers? Seriously? In our small town? Carla noticed the pain on Charley's face. Sometimes you really don't know people, Carla. They can surprise you in awful ways. Come on, let's talk to her. Amanda was taking pain medicine and looked weak. She tried to smile when she saw Charley, but it hurt her. What should I do, Charley? First, you need to report what happened. If you don't, I can't help you anymore. You didn't deserve this, Amanda, and you can't let him get away with it. Has he ever hurt you like this before? Amanda took a breath. Not like this, but he has slapped me a few times. Charley turned to Carla. Did you hear that? We need to do something. Carla was surprised. In all the years she knew him, going back to when she was 8, she had never heard him swear. Her instincts as a police officer kicked in. She sensed there was more to the story. I can't do that, Charley. She needs to make a statement and decide to press charges first. We can't do anything until she does, and she must tell the truth. Charley looked at Amanda, knowing her safety was more important than his feelings. She will. You can tell us everything you need to, right, Amanda? But Charley, no buts. Your safety is my top priority, okay? I'm going to step out while you talk to Officer Martinez. I'll be back to check on you when you're done. Thanks, Carla, for helping. He walked out, leaving 2 shocked women. Carla felt worried. If Charley, who she respected so much, was having a secret relationship with Amanda, she would be very surprised. But her job had taught her to be ready for anything. 45 minutes later, she entered the waiting area and hugged Charley tightly when she saw him standing up. She didn't say anything at first. Luckily, the waiting room was empty. It's just a common domestic case. They fought, he hit her, and that's all we need to know. Got it, Charley? He held her hand tightly. Thanks for caring. But if we need more details to get a conviction, go for it. How is she? Can she go home? No, she has to stay for the night so they can check for a concussion. She'll need a ride tomorrow and a place to stay. We can put her in a shelter for a few days, but after that, she'll have to find her own place. His dad owns the house, so she can't go back. But she can come tomorrow to pick up her things. I think he won't be there for at least a couple of days. Charley went back inside to check on Amanda. When he found her asleep, he quietly left. What a long day, he thought tiredly. When he got home, he set his alarm and went to bed quickly. His eyes opened wide when the alarm rang. He was surprised to see a bed he didn't recognize, but then he remembered everything. He took a shower, called his assistant, and told her he probably wouldn't come to work that day. She was used to him having sudden trips and didn't think much of it. Well, let's see. I find out my wife has been unfaithful for who knows how long. The man she was with tried to convince his wife to cheat with mine, but when she refused, they fought, and he hurt her. Now she is in the hospital, he is in jail, and my wife? I don't care to know about her. He frowned at his thoughts. Charley decided to stop at a diner for breakfast. He had not been there long when Officer Martinez walked in, finishing her shift. She came over, leaned down, and kissed his cheek. Everyone in the diner smiled as Charley turned red. It was well known that he blushed easily, which many women found amusing. They laughed together because it was all in good fun. She sat down in the booth. Buy breakfast for a hard-working officer, moneybags. I want steak and eggs. He smiled as she ordered her food. After she finished eating and the place quieted down, she told him about her night. He was cursing when he opened the door, thinking it was Amanda. He stopped right away when he saw me and Officer Wells. Officer Wells was a big guy who often worked domestic cases with them because it was standard to send both a man and a woman. He kept yelling when we put him in handcuffs, talking about Amanda, Rose, and you. We read him his rights and told him to be quiet. It took about 4 minutes to process him. It'll probably be 10 before his father can arrive with lawyers. Amanda won't leave the hospital until after lunch, so she'll need help to get her things. The office knows, so if she gives them a 2-hour notice, she can pick her things up any time in the next 48 hours. It's standard timing in domestic abuse cases. She has no place to go, Charley. Her family lives far away. Are you going to help her? Not directly, that would only make things worse. Come with me to the office before you head home. It won't take long. She followed him and waited outside while he went into his office, surprising his assistant. He opened the safe and took out $3,000 in cash. Then he walked back outside and handed a small bag to Martinez. This afternoon, have whoever helps her take her to your apartment complex. There are about 6 officers living there, right? Give her what's in this bag and tell her to keep it private. There's enough money in there for her to get an apartment and live for a month if she needs it. I'll owe you again. I promise I will pay you back someday. Carla listened and did what she was told. 18 months later, on her wedding day, Charley walked her down the aisle. He had paid for everything, the wedding, the honeymoon, and even the tickets for her grandparents to fly in from Mexico. During the father-daughter dance, he kissed her cheek and thanked her again for her help. Tears filled her eyes when he told her about a perfect house for a young couple to start their life, with private funds to help them buy it. With Amanda safe now, Charley went to his furthest store to spend a few days away. By the 3rd day, Rose was starting to feel less shocked. She knew not to push, so she called him once on his cell phone and sent 2 emails to each of his stores. One was for his laptop, which he always took with him, and the other was for the desktop at every store. Then she waited. 2 weeks passed. She had almost stopped exercising and gained 10 pounds. Her hair looked messy, and her clothes were not flattering. So she decided to go back to the gym. A trainer there, who had been one of her exes, brought her back to reality. He pulled her into the office and had her sit down. As soon as he did, she opened up and told him everything. Well, Rose, what did you think would happen? You weren't careful about it at all. The truth always comes out like a plant growing towards the sun. What do you really want now? I want my husband back, she said. Why? There was something missing in your marriage, or you wouldn't have done what you did. You both have money, so splitting up won't really matter. Your daughter is grown up, so she won't be an issue. You can go your own way and date others, and he will too. But from what you told me, he seems like the kind of guy who wants a serious relationship. Honestly, he might be married again before your divorce is even final. I hate to say it, but I think he was just a backup for you when you weren't dating anyone else. He paused, catching his breath. You need to get it together now. So get out there and work it off. I'm calling Gabriel. You need a haircut and some color. I'll make sure he can see you in an hour. For the first time since that Thursday night on the patio, she smiled. What about dinner tonight, Eric? We could talk about old times. Sorry, that's not going to happen. You still look great, but I'm married now, my 3rd time, and I've decided this time I'm going to stay faithful. It sounds like your husband is the serious kind. Whether you two get back together or not, he's going to want revenge, and I don't want any trouble. If you have other guys in your life, you should tell them. I hope everything works out for you. Now go and work up a sweat. As she worked out, Rose thought about what he said. He was right. She needed to warn a couple of guys. The others were in her past and seemed safe. If Charley found out she'd been with 8 lovers in the last 10 years, she'd be in big trouble. For some reason, she still loved her husband and wanted him back more than anything. Charley sat on the front porch of his farmhouse where he had been for 2 weeks. Rumors were starting to spread, but he didn't care much. He doubted anyone would be brave enough to confront him about it. The sheriff stopped by to chat. They were friends who grew up together and would often go fishing at the coast or a lake that had big catfish. The sheriff had a photo of them on his office wall, each of them holding a huge fish. They laughed about the past for a bit. Finally, Andy spoke up about what he had heard. Charley, people are talking. You've been alone here for over 2 weeks, and Rose, when she has been seen, doesn't look well. It seems to connect somehow to Amanda Peterson and her husband. He's facing charges for hurting her, and Amanda is getting a divorce. Everyone is curious about how she can afford such an expensive lawyer. Your name came up, and they might want to blame you. So, as a friend, can you tell me what's going on? Charley told him his side of the story, leaving out some details. Andy looked shocked. So that's what's going on. I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know. Yes, I'm helping Amanda with her divorce as a thank you for her honesty. We've only shared a kiss on the cheek in the hospital, and she's actually younger than your daughter, so I don't care what her husband says. If he wants to fight me, he'll get a fight. As the sheriff drove away, He couldn't believe that Rose would cheat on Charley. He had been there for them since the beginning. He felt bad for both of them, especially for Faith, who would be hurt by all this. He knew that she would likely turn to Charley, since he had almost raised her while Rose worked on building her business. Charley was more known in the community than Rose. He was sure that if it came down to picking sides, Rose would be left out. He hoped it wouldn't come to that. This situation had the signs of becoming a big problem. Rose was surprised when she saw the email. She had begun to think he would never want to speak to her again. She thought a process server might show up any day with papers for her. The email was very short. "Why?" she replied with a long message. She told him how much she loved him, how missed him, and asked to see him in person to talk. He responded with one word. "Why?" This went on for several days until he finally agreed to meet face to face, but only after she answered his question. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. She must have rewritten it many times, even asked a counselor for advice, and got help from a college student studying English to make it just right. He was cute and tall, with a great smile, and he seemed to enjoy chatting with her. She was weighing her choices, as she had never been with such a young man before, when it hit her what she was doing. She stopped right away, but paid him more than his charge and made sure to keep his card with his email and number. Confident, she sent the email. "Dear Charley, writing this is really hard for me. How do you explain hurting the man you've been with for 30 years, the man who gave you a child and who loved you so much? I can't. I don't have an answer. I've seen a counselor a few times for help, but I didn't like what they said. She mentioned things like hormone changes, a midlife crisis, and an empty nest being factors, but in the end, I did what I did because I could. I never showed off what I did, and until my recent mistake, I kept it far from you. I knew you were proud, and it would hurt you deeply. You have reacted just as I thought you would. I know that just with a few calls, you could destroy my reputation in our community or even turn our daughter against me. But I also know you're too good to do something like that. If you choose to divorce me, I know you will do it quietly and with grace. I know you well, Charley. But please know this, Charley. I never stopped loving you. Even during my mistakes, all I could think about was coming home to you, being in your arms on the patio, watching the sunset. I wish I could change the past, erase all this pain and go back to our quiet and happy life, but I doubt God is going to give me that chance. Please don't ask me about times or details. I don't want to cause you more pain than I already have. The result would be the same if it was one time or many. Just know that I will do anything, absolutely anything, to fix this. If you want to humiliate me in public, I will be there ready to accept it. If you want me to give up my business and stay home forever, I will sell my businesses tomorrow, even if I lose money. I will do anything, Charley, anything to be in your arms one more time. Just tell me when and where you want to meet. I love you, Charley. I always will. Rose. She signed it, hit send, and closed her laptop. It was now up to Charley and fate. Charley read her email 4 times, growing angrier with each read. Just because she could? It didn't mean anything to her? She still loved him? Nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. And the phrase about 1 or 100 made it clear there was more than one time. That was enough for him. He took a quiet trip out of state to the biggest town where his wife worked. He had his lawyer reach out, and he found the names of the top 3 private investigation firms in the city. He met with them all and hired 2, in case one found more than the other. He did the same at all her work locations. He paid a lot and offered bonuses for quick work. He had one order: find out everything about my wife. If you need more help, hire others. If you find anyone you think she had an affair with, find out everything you can, as far back as you need to go, and give me all the details. The 2 firm owners had dinner together. They knew and respected each other, but were a bit uneasy about what they were doing. "What do you think he is after, Jack?" one asked. "I don't think he is after anything. I believe he is a man who is hurting. Maybe he just wants to know why she cheated," Jack replied after a sip of tea. "I'm sure you did what I did, Chuck, and looked him up. He has no history of violence and is well-liked in the community. You have to look hard to find anyone who says something bad about him, and those who do usually had a reason. His kind acts are almost legendary, even if he tries to keep them quiet." They sat in silence for a bit. He might be exactly as he seemed on paper, but both knew that people are rarely what they appear. Plus, They both knew that random acts of kindness could be seen as signs of a sociopath. Chuck broke the silence. Well, we know he has around 30 million, with at least 20 of that in cash. Let's just keep a lookout and do what he paid us for. If he becomes a problem, we will try to handle it. If things get worse, we'll call the cops. Agreed? Absolutely, Jack replied. But both still felt unsure. Charley had never seen anyone with such cold eyes as when he talked about the people he suspected might be with his wife. Bobby Peterson woke up in jail thinking, "This was not how things were supposed to go. I thought it would just be some fun. No one was supposed to get upset." He couldn't believe it. His boss was flirting with him. She was attractive, especially for her age, and very wealthy. Bobby saw a chance and flirted back. When she called him into her office after work, he got excited. But all that happened was some obvious flirting and a few light touches. He was willing to wait. As the weeks passed, she flirted more, inviting him into her office and touching him softly over his pants while they shared kisses. He moved his hand under her dress and she leaned towards him. Just when he was about to go further, a secretary walked back in to grab her umbrella. Luckily, the office door was closed. Rose quickly pulled back, fixed her dress, and suggested they both leave. Bobby kissed her and gave her a quick squeeze as he left, making her react. Smiling on his way home, Bobby thought he could soon have her all to himself. Rose often complained about how much she had to travel and the extra work from the new office. Maybe she should consider hiring an assistant. Someone like him. They could save money on motel bills by being together, and that was his goal. Bobby had a plan. His father had never respected him, always calling him lazy and saying he took the easy way out. One time, he even fired Bobby for using the petty cash to buy lunch. Bobby had done it for a long time before getting caught, and it cost almost $2,500. He tried to say it was a business expense, but no one listened. His dad forced him to either pay the money back or leave, so he left. He dreamed of winning Rose away from her husband and taking her money. That would finally make his father notice him. Yes, Rose was over 20 years older, but she was still appealing and very rich. In a few years, she might slow down and he could find a younger partner or two. Maybe she would even agree to it as a way to relax. Once he had control over her money, he would make sure his father knew how successful he could be. Everything fell apart when his wife became suspicious. Even though she wasn't very smart, she began to suspect something and dug until she found their emails. Bobby turned on the charm, claiming he was just doing this for them and that he didn't care about Rose. It took some time, but she started to believe him. He even suggested she find someone rich to help them out financially. They could use that money to start a business together, with her being his secretary, just as she had planned before marrying him, but he never expected her to try to seduce Charley Barton. When she told him about it, he got upset, and she cried, spilling everything about her plans. She announced that Rose was taking Bobby to visit her offices soon. When he learned that Charley confirmed that he was fine with the open marriage idea, Amanda decided to leave him. They argued while Bobby drank, knowing he was done for. By Monday, he would probably lose his job and wouldn't be able to find work again. His dad would mock him and there would be no help coming. He felt trapped. Then Amanda said she would take everything from him and he lost it. He slapped her to make her stop talking. Maybe it was too hard, but it worked. She left, leaving him alone. He returned to his drink, trying to think of how he could come out ahead when all this ended. He thought about asking Charley for money to keep his secrets safe. Maybe that could work. A couple of hours later, someone was banging on the door and he thought, "Can't they see it's the middle of the night? Just go away, Amanda. I don't want to deal with you." His tipsy mind finally realized it wasn't Amanda. It was two police officers. One of them was very large. "Robert Peterson?" "Yeah. What do you want?" "It's late and I'm—" That's all he got out before they had him on the ground putting handcuffs on him. "Robert Peterson, you are under arrest for assaulting Amanda Peterson. You have the right to—" The female officer read his rights, but Bobby barely listened. Amanda was having him arrested for just a slap. "Wait! It was just a quick hit. We were arguing. I didn't really hurt her. I bet that old man put her up to this. Is it my fault his wife is unhappy? I hadn't even been with her yet." "Mr. Peterson, I remind you of your rights again. Anything you say can be used against you in court. We have body cameras, so everything is being recorded. It's best to remain quiet. Something in the eyes of the woman officer made him pause. She looked really angry. He stayed quiet the whole time he was being taken to his cell. He didn't say a word. His mood got worse when he learned he couldn't get bail for at least 48 hours. This was the usual waiting time for cases like his. Feeling embarrassed, the next morning he called his dad. After explaining what happened, he had to listen to his dad laugh for a few minutes. Finally, his dad said he would start the paperwork to pay his bail and get him a lawyer, but only if Bobby promised to pay him back. When Bobby got out, Amanda had already taken everything that showed she had lived in the apartment. She had vanished, and no one knew where she was. Well, her lawyer knew. That lawyer was waiting outside the jail to serve him papers. Amanda was on medical leave from her job until she healed, and they wouldn't tell him anything about her. His lawyer said he might face jail time unless he could convince her to drop the charges. A few days later, he ran into Charley Barton on the street. They both went to lunch at the same diner. Bobby saw how all the waitresses fussed over Charley. He grabbed his own waitress and asked, "What can I do to get service like that?" The waitress looked at his hand on her arm and then pulled away. She forced a big smile and said, "Well, not being an abuser would help. If you want what Charley gets, maybe start by being someone people respect and try to tip better." She said it loud enough for everyone around to hear, and they all laughed. Bobby was about to argue when the owner came over. "Enjoying your burger, Bobby?" she asked, finally a friendly face. "Yeah, it's great, thanks." The owner smiled at him. "You're welcome. But if I were you, I'd chew slowly and enjoy it while you can. This will be the last meal you have here. Once you leave, you're banned for life. I was married to a jerk like you, and I don't want you around as a reminder of those bad times." The laughter was louder this time, and Bobby felt his face go pale with anger. Screw them! He swore he would show them all. One day they would regret how they treated him. He glanced over at Charley, who was looking at him with a small smirk. Bobby nearly walked over to wipe that grin off his face when two female police officers, one city, one county, walked in and came to his table. The county officer took off her big hat and set it on the table, then bent down and kissed his cheek. The city officer did the same on his other cheek. The lunch crowd smiled, used to this, and they laughed as Charley turned bright red. They sat down, but the county officer's smile faded when she saw Bobby. It was the same cop who had arrested him, now chatting with Charley. She whispered something to the city officer, who gave Bobby a cold look. After that, she went back to her lunch, teasing Charley occasionally. When they left their bills on the table, and Charley paid for everything, leaving a nice tip. Bobby ate slowly, feeling spiteful. He didn't leave a tip, but the waitress smiled at him and wished him a good day. As soon as he stepped outside, he noticed the bright yellow boot on his car. He spotted the fire hydrant just 5 feet from his tire. Had that always been there? He picked up the ticket from his windshield and walked to City Hall. The fine was $138, and he had to wait until 4 o'clock for someone to come take the boot off. Great. He had to walk back to the office. Amazingly, Rose hadn't fired him yet. No one had seen her for almost 3 weeks, so they thought she was working at another office out of town. He kept quiet and focused on his work, hoping to get a good reference when he finally got let go. For 2 weeks, no one at the office said anything. Then the whispers started. No one wanted to look him in the eye. Conversations became short and rushed. He felt like yelling at them. This wasn't his fault. Bobby didn't know it, but he was not seeing things clearly. He thought highly of himself and twisted his past to fit what he wanted his future to be. Only when he was caught in a lie would he think about telling the truth. And when he was caught, he would charm his way out of it and start lying again. Even with his troubled relationship with his dad and the worry about his job, he couldn't shake the idea that he would somehow come out on top. He was just about to drift off to sleep when a thought hit him. Faith. She had flirted with him a little while back when she came to her mom's office during college breaks. He thought he could win her over, and they could get married. That would show everyone how wrong they were about him. They would have to sit in church while he and Faith exchanged vows, and it would be perfect. Feeling better for the first time in weeks, he went to sleep. The next morning, he remembered how attractive Faith was. She was beautiful, a younger version of her mother, tall and with nice cheekbones. Every man she met tried to win her over, but she always turned them down. saying she was focused on starting her business. Her business had taken off, thanks to her family. The vet they used for years had gotten a bit forgetful but wouldn't stop working. Animals began to suffer, and soon legal complaints piled up. As he had to pay more for insurance and other costs, he couldn't keep his practice open. Faith, her 3 helpers, and the older vet who worked part-time were overwhelmed with work now. Feeling like she needed extra help, Faith placed an ad in some veterinary magazines to find another assistant and ended up hiring a husband and wife team. The woman had worked as a vet in a zoo, and soon they were caring for zebras, llamas, and a mix of other exotic pets owned by people. This helped their business grow and brought in a lot of work. Faith and the older vet also visited local farms to help with the births of horses and cows, among other things that didn't need an office visit. In 2 years, her practice was thriving, and she had reached most of the people in her area. She thought about starting more clinics like her parents did, but she knew that would mean managing them instead of being a vet, and that wasn't why she went to school. Charley and Rose were very proud of her. Charley even joked that he wouldn't mind seeing the next generation of their family. She promised him with a kiss on the cheek that she would let him know if she decided to start a family. When things got too stressful, she would gather her single friends, and they would go to a bigger town for a little fun. They would rent a hotel room, visit some bars, and just relax. Carla and Vicky, also single and working in law enforcement, took turns making sure everyone stayed safe. Most of the time, they would just drink, dance, and flirt. Sometimes a friend would meet someone special, but that wasn't their main purpose for going out. Once, Carla stopped a man who tried to slip Faith a dangerous drink, and she made the bartender call the police. The drink was tested, and the man faced serious charges for trying to harm Faith. It turned out he had a gun hidden in his waistband, too. Charley used his resources to make sure the man could not hurt anyone again. He took a deal and served 8 months of a 3-year sentence. While in jail, he was beaten by other inmates regularly because he didn't fit in. He could barely walk when he got out and had problems seeing from one eye. He learned the hard way how much pain can be caused when someone does not give consent. A couple of weeks later, after more trouble, he moved far away, and no one ever heard from him again. Charley felt satisfied when he heard that news. Faith had a heads up from her friend at an animal shelter, so she wasn't surprised when Bobby brought in a cat. She was surprised, however, by how well the cat reacted to him. Putting on her professional face, she took care of the necessary paperwork herself. "What's her name?" "Lady Gray." Faith looked up and couldn't help but smile. Bobby was actually blushing. It was the only name that fit. She looked so noble, don't you think? Maybe Bobby was more than he seemed, she thought. "How old is she?" 31? One of her helpers giggled. "Not your age, Bobby. How old is your cat?" He thought about what he had heard at the shelter. A little over a year. "Where did you get her? Was she lost, or did someone give her to you, or was it from the shelter?" "It's a rescue." Faith smiled and set her pen down. "You can take her home now, Bobby. All rescue pets are already neutered or spayed. Make sure she has water, feed her well, take her for checkups sometimes, and give her attention. She'll be your friend for many years." Bobby's plan didn't work as he thought it would. He stumbled through some small talk until she told him she had other patients to care for. He felt like she was laughing at him, which upset him. He had an idea and parked a bit away from the clinic, letting Lady Gray go free. She would find her way back to Faith, who would take care of her and call him. He planned to charm her with his thanks when he came back after closing time. Oddly, he felt disappointed and almost went back. "Forget it, it's just a cat," he told himself. "I'll get her back tomorrow." Faith recognized Lady Gray right away when she saw her by the barn looking confused. "Come on, sweet girl. Let's get you inside, fed and cozy for the night." Lady Gray purred happily as Faith held her and gently ate from her bowl while Faith finished her work. She couldn't help but admire the cat's graceful shape. Then she remembered who owned her and felt a little frown. On a whim, she picked up her phone and called, "Hi, Mom. It's me." She pulled the phone away from her ear while her mother chatted excitedly. "Yes, I know it's been a while. I wonder what could keep an only child from visiting. Oh, right, I remember." More excited talking filled the line until Faith spoke sharply. "Mom, listen. We're going to dinner tomorrow at China House, sharp at 7. I'll meet you there. And Mom, we need to have a serious talk. If you try to dodge any question, we won't talk for a long time. Remember that. If you don't show up, I'll know all I need to know. Good night, Mom." She hung up, her mother still chatting. Picking Lady Grey up, she found a box to keep her in for the night. The cat meowed softly, and against her better judgment, Faith took her out again. "Just for one night, and don't get used to it," Lady Grey purred contentedly in the passenger seat and strutted to her apartment door like she owned the place. "No loud noises. Be good. Time for bed now." Faith set her in the utility room on a bed made from towels, putting water and food beside her. The next morning she woke up feeling strange and saw Lady Grey sitting on her chest, gently tapping her nose with a paw while purring. Faith groaned as she got up, holding the cat as she moved to the kitchen. "What? Are you my alarm now? I usually sleep for another 30 minutes. Do you think you can behave while I take a shower?" Lady Grey sat meowing while Faith showered. She was surprised when Faith opened the shower door and sprayed her with water. Lady Grey yowled and darted into the kitchen. Faith laughed and finished her shower. Lady Grey jumped onto the kitchen table, licking herself dry and looking very unhappy. Faith picked her up and rubbed her belly. "Lesson learned, baby. You better behave, or you'll get wet." Lady Grey walked out with her tail held high and hopped into the passenger seat of the car. When they arrived at the clinic, she strutted in like she owned the place. "Who is this?" one of the assistants asked as she picked up the cat and ruffled her fur. "This is the very regal Lady Grey. I think her owner will call soon. Please make her feel welcome," Faith said. Lady Grey tried to protest, but the assistant placed her in a container until lunchtime when she could go out and play. When Faith took her lunch under a tree, Lady Grey jumped right into her lap, even nibbling on some of her tuna sandwich. The rest of the afternoon, Lady Grey roamed freely, following Faith around the barn and exploring a bit. Faith lost sight of her, but found her inside a stall, curled up on top of a sleeping colt. She took a picture before lifting the cat up. By the time Faith finished her rounds, Bobby had called. She returned the call, letting him know that she had his cat, and he could come over any time. She told him what a sweet cat Lady Grey was. Something about his voice seemed off, so she asked Nancy to stay close when he came. Bobby was high. He had helped a friend hide money using fake companies and offshore accounts. The friend turned out to be a drug dealer who got Bobby started on cocaine in small doses. Bobby liked the feeling and thought it helped him focus and think better. He never did drugs at work, maybe just a couple of times at home or out with friends. But now, trouble had come. He hadn't been fired, but it was clear he could no longer work in the same office. He was moved to a different location, one Faith rarely visited. To help him, Rose made him the office manager and gave him a big raise. "I'm trying my best for us, Bobby. I can't keep in touch with you if I want any chance to get back with my husband. We both made mistakes, so if you're thinking about suing, you should think again. Amanda shared all our emails, and I can make it seem like I was just a woman going through a tough time who got involved with a younger man. We would all lose out, but you would lose the most. Just accept the promotion, work for a bit, and when you find a better job, you'll get a good recommendation and a nice severance package." Feeling trapped, he accepted the transfer. Bobby was feeling good. His plan was working. He thought he would charm Faith again after work, and soon she would do whatever he wanted. To give himself a little boost, he did a small line of drugs. The air felt electric as he approached the clinic. She let him in without locking the door. He smiled when he saw her with the cat. Nancy was in the office, listening and watching. "Looks like you made a friend," Nancy said, giggling. She saw Bobby as a big softy. Faith smiled, but it felt cold. "Bobby, I don't know what you're trying to do, so let me be clear. I've always thought you were sleazy. What you were planning with my mom makes me feel sick. So whatever you want, you're not getting it here. I suggest you take your cat and leave. Better yet, leave her here and I'll find her a good home." Bobby was shocked. She couldn't mean that. He was Bobby Peterson. Women never said no to him. "Come on, Faith. Why are you being like this? I know you felt it yesterday. We'd be great together, king and queen of the county." "Let me think. What would I bring to the relationship? Looks? Money? And what would you bring? A broke guy on probation? One mistake away from jail? Yeah, sounds like a great future." Bobby had faced trial for assault charges. Thanks to a good lawyer, he got probation with community service and anger management classes. He went to the classes, laughing at how the leader believed in her teachings. He hadn't done his community service and thought he might try to convince Faith to let him do it at her clinic to bond. Her sarcasm only made him angrier. Suddenly, Bobby was at the counter, his hand on her arm. She looked down and smirked. "You should let go of my arm and get out of my office. This is your only warning." She looked at him like he was some kind of animal on her table. He hit her without thinking, knocking the cat from her arms. Lady Grey reacted, her claws sinking into his bare arm. He ripped her off and threw her against the wall as hard as he could. She slowly slid down, trying to stand. Faith reacted by punching him with all her strength, but it didn't free her. He pulled her over the counter, heading toward the door, yelling the whole time, "Stupid girl. This could have been a lot easier. Now I have to teach you a hard lesson." Faith was yelling and still hitting him. She managed to hit him, and then he struck her hard in the face. Faith felt her nose break just before she fell unconscious. Nancy called 911 right after he touched Faith. She ran out from the back when she saw him trying to pull an unconscious Grace through the front door. She grabbed the tranquilizer gun and shot it into his leg. It was the first thing she found as she rushed out. Sometimes they used these darts if a big animal was hurt and wouldn't let anyone near. Bobby yelled in pain and turned, hitting Nancy with one punch. He almost reached his car when the first police car skidded in, blocking the driveway. Officer Wells jumped out with his gun ready. "Get on the ground! Now!" Bobby still had Faith and put a hand around her throat. "Stay back or I'll hurt her. Move aside!" Carla Martinez arrived just then. "Jimmy, if he does anything to her, you drop him, got it?" She had her taser ready, moving carefully to the side. "Stay where you are." She looked at Jimmy, silently saying, "Distract him." "Hey, Bobby, I want to thank you for being so foolish. Did you know I'm dating Amanda now? She said she wants a real man for a change. She's really something and says she never knew what real love was until she got rid of you." Jimmy was talking big. They were dating, but they weren't close yet. They both liked each other, but were taking their time. Carla moved in when the tranquilizer hit Bobby. He dropped Faith and fell to the ground. She shocked him with the taser just to be safe. They needed 3 ambulances, one for Faith, one for Nancy, and one for Bobby, who was handcuffed to the stretcher. Faith was treated for her broken nose, a concussion, and bruises from being dragged. Nancy had a concussion too and stayed overnight for observation. Bobby was checked over. They found cocaine in his system, which led them to search his house. They found more drugs there. He faced charges for drug possession, breaking probation, assault, serious assault, and cruelty to animals. His probation was canceled, and he went to jail. His bond was so high his father couldn't afford it without losing a lot. He didn't answer Bobby's calls. Rose waited at the restaurant for 3 hours. By the second hour, she was crying, thinking Faith had ignored her. When she finally turned on her phone, she saw all the messages. She was shocked when she heard Charlie's last note. "Rose, get out from whoever you're with and answer your phone. Faith is hurt and in the hospital. Your boy Bobby attacked her. The cops got there before anything else happened, but he already beat her up. When you're done, come over here." She didn't know what hurt more, knowing Faith was hurt or hearing Charlie's harsh words. Rose didn't remember driving to the hospital. Suddenly, she was standing by Faith, disgusted by her black eyes, broken nose, and bruises. She bowed over her crying, her tears wetting Faith's gown, when Faith woke up. When Faith opened her eyes, she saw who was holding her and wrapped her arms around Rose. They cried for a few minutes before Rose stepped back and held her hand. "I'm sorry I couldn't make dinner, Mom." "It's okay, honey. I'm so sorry this happened." Faith tried to comfort her. "No, Mom. It's Bobby's fault, not yours." Rose knew Faith was just trying to make her feel better, but she let it go. They talked for about 10 minutes before the medicine made Faith sleepy again. Then, she saw Charlie for the first time in almost 3 months. Her heart raced. He looked tired, older, and serious. She stepped in front of him. "Please, Charlie, we need to talk. You promised." He gently removed her hands from his. "I will talk. I keep my promises, but give me 2 weeks. I'll email you later. I need a favor. Stay with Faith tonight. I have some things to finish, then I'll be back early tomorrow. Can you do that for me?" Curious about what was so important, she nodded. He left without saying more. Bobby slowly came to and wondered what had happened. He tried to move but realized he was handcuffed to the bed. Memories hit him and anger surged. That girl needed a lesson. Then he remembered what he did and fear gripped him. He was in serious trouble. He heard a noise and saw Charley Barton staring at him. It took a moment for Bobby to focus, but he saw it was him. Charley didn't look angry. He was calm, just watching him. Something in Charley's icy stare pierced through Bobby's muddled thoughts. He suddenly remembered everything. Faith, the police, the attack. I'm in big trouble, he thought. I can't go to jail. I need my dad to help me. He looked back at Charley, wondering why no one was watching the door. Charley's eyes did not blink or waver. They were the eyes of a predator. A tiger, maybe? No, Bobby thought of a movie he had seen when he was a teenager. It was about a Nile crocodile, a huge and dangerous animal. These crocodiles would lie still on sandbanks and riverbanks, then move with amazing speed or quietly slip into the water. They would come back out suddenly, grabbing animals before they knew what was happening. The filmmakers had used underwater cameras, showing in slow motion how a deer-like creature struggled as the crocodile rolled, drowning it. Suddenly, Charley moved, noticing that Bobby was awake. Ah, Bobby, you're awake! I wanted to be the first person you saw when you opened your eyes. I want to be the last person you see every night. According to the DA and my lawyers, you have 8 to 10 years before you breathe fresh air again. That is, if you behave. Charley stood over the handcuffed man. Bobby felt real fear, trying to pull away from the cuffs. Charley leaned closer, whispering, You foolish little jerk. First my wife and now my daughter. If you think you can mess with my family and get away with it, wait and see. You'll learn what it costs. Right now, I don't care about my wife anymore. But you should never have touched my daughter. That was a big mistake, Bobby. You broke her nose. Don't worry. You'll feel that pain soon enough. It's a shame, really. You're going to be very popular in prison, but having a broken nose will be a challenge. Bobby was struggling, trying to shout, but Charley pressed a folded towel over his mouth. Charley kept talking in a calm voice while Bobby struggled. Don't worry, Bobby. We'll find you a husband, and you'll be safe as long as you make him happy. I'll help you with that. You'll spend every day, bent over or with your mouth full, thanking me for keeping you alive. Oh, and don't fret. I won't let them mess up your face. We need to keep you looking nice. They can tattoo your backside all they want, maybe your arm, but everyone will see the mark on you and know what you did while you were there. It'll show you were someone special. You might even get a few offers. I might even set up another marriage for you. Charley leaned so close that their faces were nearly touching. Bobby felt Charley's grip tightening painfully. He was screaming into the towel, small whimpers escaping until the pain got so bad that he lost consciousness, his vision fading. Charley's face was the last thing he saw. Charley looked down, feeling no regret. Everything he told Bobby would happen. He walked out, tossing the towel away and thanking the nurse as he passed her station. He was still out of it. I just wanted him to know that I knew it was the drugs and bore him no anger. I'll pray for him. The nurse watched him leave, thinking how kind Charley was. She would never have forgiven him if it had been her daughter. Faith knew exactly where she was when she woke up. The smells of the hospital were familiar. She was surprised to see her mother by her side, but felt a bit ashamed when she looked around for her father. She touched her nose, remembering what had happened. Rose, noticing her movement, woke up, and tears began to flow. They talked, probably the most in-depth conversation they had had in years. I guess I'm like Dad in a way, Mom. Why? Rose looked at her daughter sadly, a single tear rolling down her cheek. You think I haven't asked myself that 1,000 times in the last few months? I have seen 2 different therapists, and they both said the same thing, the success syndrome. As a person gains wealth and power, they start to think they deserve everything, that they can ignore the normal rules of behavior, that they are above judgment. This is what I want, so I should have it. Rose sighed. Of course, I was very wrong. It just got easier over time. I told myself he had figured it out, and if he didn't say anything, it didn't matter, so I could keep going. It made me arrogant, and that arrogance got me caught. Faith stared for a moment. So you're saying if you hadn't been arrogant and gotten caught, you'd still be cheating? If you liked it so much, why didn't you get a divorce, especially after I graduated high school? Divorces happen all the time. It would have hurt me, but I would have handled it better than how things are now. Rose looked horrified. But I didn't want a divorce then, and I don't want one now. I'll change, go back to being faithful. Just give me a chance. Mom, snap out of it, listen to yourself, let it go. You got caught and almost admitted you had been doing it for a long time. Dad is never going to forgive you, and you know it. Accept the divorce when it comes and move on. Have all the fun you want without worrying about getting caught. I remember my psychology classes, and I bet part of your thrill from those flings was that you were hiding it from Dad. I bet when you were home and you and Dad were close, part of your pleasure came from comparing him to your lovers. Rose blushed deeply, and Faith knew she had hit the mark. Help us all out here, Mom. Go quietly. Don't make us the talk of the town. Please let us keep a little dignity. Just then, the doctor arrived, and they had to stop talking. Charley waited until Rose walked away before he went into Faith's room. He felt a little sad. He had loved Rose for a long time. He never thought he would be in this difficult situation. He forced a smile and opened the door. Faith smiled back at him. Even with her bruised eyes and a splint on her nose, she looked lovely. You just missed Mom. Her smile faded when he nodded. I know. Will you ever talk to her? She asked. Yes, soon, but I will choose when and where. Faith paused before speaking. I know I shouldn't say this, but please be kind. Let it go, Dad. Let her go. She isn't the same woman you married. You're only 55. Find someone new and be happy. For once, joy didn't shine in his eyes when he looked at her. Faith felt scared. She remembered a dark moment when she was 7. Her friend came to daycare with bruises and a black eye. During lunch, she told her dad what had happened. Later, she saw her dad, Mrs. Wright, the daycare boss, and Jose go into the office. Jose was a new worker from Costa Rica, and he had a drinking problem. Faith had gone to ask about having her friends Carla and Susie over for dinner, but instead, she saw her dad and Jose behind one of the fertilizer buildings. When she got there, Jose was passed out. Her dad stood there, rubbing his hands. He pulled Jose up, slapped him until he woke and whispered something in his ear. Faith quietly slipped away and ran back to daycare, never telling anyone what she saw. That evening, her mom asked about the scrape on his cheek and the black eye. He said he fell while moving some fertilizer bags, and her mom lectured him to be more careful and let the workers do their job. Jose didn't come back to daycare for a week. When he did, he had news. His family was facing deportation because they were in the country illegally. Charley stepped in to help them, sponsoring them and working with his lawyers for green cards. He even hired Jose's wife to help with lunch and work with the teachers. When he found out she used to be a second-grade teacher, she ended up teaching Spanish to the older kids in the afternoons. After her dad's visit, Faith laid back, remembering her childhood. She realized that many of her happy memories were with her father, while her mother seemed less present. She thought about how her mom started fading from her life when her dad opened his third office. Her mom would rush in, give her a quick kiss, and then leave for her home office after dinner, hardly asking about her day. Her dad became the main caregiver, and her mother's absence made Faith lean on him more. She knew that if she hadn't needed him so much, he might not have added daycare centers to his business. He was a great parent and seemed to know exactly what she needed. It wasn't until college that she learned he spoke with teachers and doctors to make sure he was doing a good job. It wasn't just about school either. She realized he helped her be everything he wanted. A tough girl, a fancy lady, and even the son he didn't have. He taught her to fish, shoot, and even hunt. Charley still had a picture of her with the first deer she shot when she was 12. He shaped her into the woman she had become, strong and loyal to her friends, and tough on her enemies. Charley saw this, but Rose didn't realize that money wasn't everything to Faith. She grew up like a princess, having all she needed and more. With her dad's influence, she never let money control her. She might splurge now and then, but she quickly settled back to her true self. When she finished vet school, her dad took her for a ride to a field between their town and the county seat. He handed her a deed. I bought this for you. Take it to Jerry, our lawyer, to transfer it. It's 26 acres. You can build your clinic, a barn, paddocks, and kennels. You will have all you need. The money will be available, but this is all on you. It's up to you to make it succeed. She felt touched and thankful, They walked the land as she shared her ideas on where to put things, asking for his advice. He just smiled, saying, "Get a good architect and listen to them." On the way back to town, Charley brought up money again. "You're my only child. When I pass, apart from a few small gifts, you will inherit everything. Your mom has her business, so she will be fine. I expect you will inherit a lot from her, too. You could end up being the richest person around. Be careful, though. There will always be people who want to take advantage. Keep your head straight, and you will do great." While her clinic was being built, Faith thought a lot about money. It cost $800,000 when it was finished, but the land was fully hers. She first relied heavily on the lawyers and didn't ask Charley for advice, knowing she wanted to handle things by herself. Once the clinic was up and running, she took a step back and felt satisfied with her life. By the 10th month, the clinic was making a profit. After a year, she added more staff to keep up with demand. She was even turning away customers because she wanted to ensure the best care for everyone. For a moment, she thought about starting another clinic, but then she remembered her mother. No, this one is enough, she decided. When she had a family, she wanted to be there for her kids. Faith understood that when she found a partner, he would need to be strong enough to handle her bold personality. So far, none of her dates met that standard. The two private investigators met again at the end of their work. After 10 weeks of thorough investigation, they had uncovered several affairs that went back 6 years. Chuck frowned at the last 2 reports and felt relieved he didn't live nearby. "He's going to be upset when he sees this." "I know I would be," Chuck said. "You're right," Chuck nodded. "But this is what he paid for, and I won't hide anything. I don't want any trouble coming back to me." "Me neither. Let's make the call." They met in Chuck's office. After letting the client know they worked separately but reached similar conclusions, they handed over the results, both on a disk and in a hard copy. It filled 4 big boxes. The client sat quietly as they explained what they found, thanked them, paid them, and left. Both men were glad to see him go and made a mental note to keep an eye on the news. Charley returned to the farm, took out the files, made a pot of coffee, and began reading. He tried to stay calm because he had prepared himself for what he would find. But when he reached the second most recent affair, he lost control. He screamed in anger and threw his coffee cup into the wall. His hands shook for a few moments before he forced himself to relax, putting on a neutral expression, and began to think. Rose sat at the conference table, her hands shaking so much that she gripped the edges to steady herself. This was it, the meeting with Charley. She knew her chances of a happy ending were slim, but she still held on to hope. He insisted that the lawyers wait outside. He wanted this last meeting of the Rose and Charley story to be private. As he looked at her, he had to admit she looked good and appeared years younger. Her skirt was a bit too short, and her blouse was just transparent enough to show hints of what lay beneath. Her hair was styled in a way she hadn't done in years, one that he liked. He appreciated her effort. She stood up to hug him, but he stepped back to the side of the table. This wasn't a good sign, she thought. Still, she greeted him with a bright smile. "Hi, Charley. How are you?" He replied politely. "I'm as well as I can be, Rose. I have to say, you really dressed up for today, didn't you? I appreciate it, but you've always looked good to me." Rose smiled proudly. "Yes, obviously I wanted to look nice for you. Thanks for putting in that effort." He placed a thick packet on the table. Rose frowned, realizing this was not going as she hoped. He sighed. It was time for the last act of their story. "If you remember, I asked you about your past, how long, and how many lovers you've had." Charley held up a slim folder. "Here's what you gave me." Then he opened a thick folder. "This is what my investigators found. Let's see how they match up." Rose felt faint, as if she could hear her marriage ending. She waved a hand to recover. "Don't bother. You knew I was lying when I sent that to you. Why drag this out?" Charley ignored her and read the name of her last lover. "Bob Walton, 40 years old, married, with 4 kids. He owns an insurance agency which you switched your office coverage to after your first meeting. Ever wondered what your lovers think of you? Listen to this." He pressed a button and a recording began. "Yeah, I was with her. Not bad for her age, but honestly, if it weren't for business, I wouldn't be interested. The term cougar is too nice, more like a dinosaur about to disappear." Rose's face twisted in horror. Before she could speak, Charley continued. Pretty rough, huh? I met him 2 weeks ago for a talk. He was upset and nearly sick after hearing I might open a rival office nearby. If he quoted a price, I'd offer the same service for less, even if I had to pay the difference myself. I'd give a bigger discount if his clients switched to me. Charley smiled slightly, remembering. It was sad watching a grown man cry and beg for mercy. I even made him a deal. If he confessed everything to his wife, I might go easy on him. It was terrible, Rose. She brought their 5-year-old son because he said it was an emergency. I took the child away for ice cream while she listened to his confession. Watching her pain nearly broke me. She begged me not to ruin him, to think of their children. She didn't say our children, but her children. Rose put her hand to her throat, looking at the monster before her. Don't worry, Rose. I didn't start an agency. I heard they're not together anymore. He's living in a tiny room at his office. Maybe they'll find a way to be together again. Who knows? Charley sorted through some papers and mentioned a name. He had gotten that man fired and mostly pushed out of the business. So he moved 400 miles away and started fresh. He was already divorced, Rose. Seems like you were just one of many. I really hope you were careful. I got tested 2 months ago when I realized what was happening. I'm fine now, but, things like AIDS can take longer to show up. Rose didn't have the courage to tell him she had a doctor at one of her offices out of state who checked her every month. After their meeting ended, she noticed he had missed one appointment. Thank goodness. Things could have gotten really messy. But it wasn't really a serious affair, just a 2-day fling after a night of drinking. He kept talking until he got to her trainer. I kind of liked him, Rose. He was honest. No tricks with him. Listen, she came on to me. I had just been through a rough breakup. The last girl cheated on me. I felt a bit lost then. We were together maybe 6 times in total. I won't lie, she was pretty good back when we were together. I know how this goes, mister. There are talks going around. I ask one small favor. I'm in this business with 2 partners. If you ruin me, you ruin them, and they don't even know your wife. Let me leave quietly, help them protect themselves, then I'll take my wife and disappear. I'm going home to break my wife's heart. She has a good job, one she loves, and she could really succeed. If she chooses to stay with me, I'll understand. I need to say this now. I don't know you well, and I don't like what you're about to do, but Rose spoke highly of you. She came by a few weeks ago for some advice. I told her to move on, but I don't think she listened. Please stop with me. Don't seek more revenge. Even now, I bet it's changed you into someone you don't want to be. Don't punish yourself any longer. Try to find peace in your life. You know what, Rose? He was right. Hurting those guys didn't make me feel better for long, so I stopped and left the trainer alone. Hurting them didn't change how I felt about your betrayal, so I'm done. It's over. The way they described the woman they were with doesn't match the woman who was at home with me. You've done this so easily for so long that I'd never trust you again. Never. Jerry has the papers. They're very simple. You keep everything from your work. I keep what's mine. It's all in the prenups. You can have the house. I'll take the farm. No ghosts, no memories. My will is already changed, and Faith will get it all now. You don't need anything. I looked into your finances. Congrats, Rose. You've always been good with money. We're finished. It will be a long time before I see another sunset without thinking of that night. Before I go, you can say anything you want. He waited patiently while she gathered herself. I'm so sorry, Charley. Even now, I can't understand why I did what I did. I still want a life with you, but I know that can't happen. I wake up at night reaching for you, and when I remember, I cry again. Here's my offer. I won't fight the divorce. You deserve it. But if you ever need me for anything, call. I want your promise that if you haven't found someone in 2 years, you'll think about dating me again. No strings, just 2 people seeing if they get along. Can you promise me that? No, Rose, I can't promise that. But when the time comes, I'll think about it. That's all I can give you. Goodbye, Rose. Charley left her crying at the table. Jerry and her lawyer had gone over the deal, and both thought it was best. Rose didn't even read it. She just signed where she was told. The next day, she called Faith. Faith came out and spent a week with her, holding her while she cried and sometimes crying with her. Faith would visit her dad at his office and farm. He got a little emotional at times, but seemed to be doing well. Faith knew his pain was deeper than her mom's, so she watched him closely. So there it was, A happy life ruined, the king betrayed, but life goes on. Rose focused on her work and in 6 years had doubled her offices. She was open about her life now. There was no reason to hide anymore. She still liked younger men, but now understood them better, using them for her own happiness. At 61, she shocked everyone by marrying a man almost 70. She gave her old home to Faith and moved into his nice house. There was talk at her office that even though they seemed in love, he had problems and didn't mind if she had other discreet encounters. Faith checked on her dad now and then, but had a business to run and someone new in her life. He sold vet supplies mostly online, but would spend some time traveling every few months to see customers. He was tall and good-looking, with a gentle way that both people and animals liked. He was strong, too. One day, Faith was working with a stallion that was acting up. The horse lifted his head and nearly pulled her off the ground. Just as the horse was about to run, a hand reached out and grabbed the halter. The horse tried to push away, but the grip held firm. The man talked gently the whole time. Realizing he wasn't going to get what he wanted, the horse calmed down. Faith asked Nancy and her helper to take him back to his stall. "Thank you," she said, extending her hand. "He was very excited. Carmela is in heat, and he can smell it. I would have lost control of him for sure. I'm Faith." "Charley," he replied, noticing an unusual look on her face. "And don't underestimate yourself. The halter would have had to break before you let go. Besides," he smiled, still holding her hand, "it's not just horses. Look at how silly men act when they meet someone they like." Faith felt a bit shy as she realized he was still holding her hand. His grip was strong but friendly, and she could feel warmth. He finally let go. "Nice to meet you, Faith. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." He walked into the clinic, smiling. His steps were confident and quick, as if he was sure of where he was going. After finishing her tasks, Faith felt a little annoyed to see her assistant flirting with Charley. "And here she is now. Faith, meet Charley. He brings us most of our supplies. He came by last time when you were out delivering a colt. Charley, meet Faith, the owner and head vet here." "We've met," he said, offering his hand again. "How about lunch? I'm new to the area, so I don't know the best places. We can say it's for business, a salesman making friends with the owner." Heather was waiting for Faith to turn him down, like she had done with every other man who asked her out. She was shocked when Faith asked him to wait a few minutes so she could freshen up. Faith noticed Charley's truck and thought it was impressive, an F-150 with a secure bed cover. He saw her looking. "I don't like small cars. This way I have space for samples and paperwork," he said. They started talking about new medicines on the market. He surprised her by saying his company had brochures on different procedures, along with ones that gave tips on pet care and common health issues. When they arrived at the diner, they parked next to a similar truck, an F-250. Faith smiled. Taking his hand, she led him to a table. A man in his later years sat with a much younger woman who was clearly pregnant and chatting excitedly. She stopped talking when they approached. "Hey, Carla, one more month to go? Carla, this is Charley." She turned to the older man. "Dad, meet Charley, my future husband. And Charley, meet my dad, your future father-in-law." Everyone, except Faith, looked shocked. "Just kidding. Seriously, Charley, this is my dad, and Dad, this is Charley, my lunch date. What's the special today?" They all settled in. Carla and Faith chatted about the baby, while the two Charleys discussed many things, including business. Charley Sr. showed interest in selling pet care products. Charley Jr. was surprised when he found out that Charley Sr. owned several places for selling his products. Faith hit the table with her hand to get everyone's attention. "Enough about babies and pets. What's for dessert?" "Mary made banana pudding, but it's almost all gone. I saved one for Carla and me, but you guys might miss out," Charley Sr. said with a grin. If Faith found out Mary had banana pudding before she arrived, she would have ordered it all. Faith felt let down. Mary made the best banana pudding. Charley Sr. had one big serving left, which he gave to Charley playfully. Charley handed Faith a spoon, and they shared. He let her have most of it. The next time he visited, they had lunch again, this time without Charley Sr., who was away. Carla showed off her new baby boy. When he wouldn't stop crying, Charley took him from a worried Carla and gently rocked him, singing softly. In just a few minutes, the baby calmed down and fell asleep. The diners watched, amazed, as he carefully put the baby back in his chair. Noticing the looks from Carla and Faith, he smiled. If it works with puppies, why not with babies? Faith kissed him on the cheek. Just so we're clear, when our kids are sick or need to be soothed, you'll be the one losing sleep. I'll just poke you awake and roll over. Charley wasn't bothered at all. He just smiled and said that if he helped make the babies, it would be worth it. Faith turned red while Carla and another woman laughed. The third time Charley visited, they had lunch and a very nice time together. They talked and texted all the time, and when he returned again, he hadn't made any hotel plans. Faith arranged for no interruptions until Monday. Their time together was wonderful. They explored their feelings and grew closer. They enjoyed each other's company all over her house. Late Saturday night, she took him to the farm, asking him to be quiet and help her with the quilts. Charley, a light sleeper, heard them arrive. Grabbing his old revolver, he slipped out and approached the barn sideways. He recognized her truck and stood by it, wondering until he heard some laughter and saw some straw fall. Quietly smiling, he returned inside and went back to bed. The next morning, the only sign of the visit was the hay shed doors left open. He laughed as he closed them, remembering the full moon from the night before. Once news got out that Charley was single again, a lot of people began to take interest. He got invites to fancy events, dinners, and even a cruise. He smiled and politely turned down every invite. Women of all ages tried to catch his attention. At first, he thought it was too soon to date, but soon it turned into a fun game. He would tell his assistant where he planned to have lunch, knowing she would mention it to her friends. Then, he would go somewhere else. The place he skipped would often get busy with people ordering diet plates. To keep himself away from these distractions, he put a fence and a gate at the end of his driveway. Only he and Faith had the keys. That didn't mean he didn't date at all. He went out regularly while traveling for work. One time he liked a woman so much he brought her back to his farm. But 2 weekends later he overheard her on the phone talking about changes she wanted to make once they were together. He never went out with her again. With just 10 months until his 60th birthday, he was surprised by a buzzing sound at the gate. He felt annoyed by the interruption and spoke shortly into the radio. "Who is it?" "It's your cousin Cindy. Open the gate fast. My car might break down." "I don't remember a cousin Cindy. Not by blood, by marriage. I'm Devon's wife. I have kids here. Are you going to let me in or not?" He frowned. Devon was one of the few people who had tried to trick him before. But Cindy didn't say anything bad about him. Plus, she mentioned kids. He reluctantly opened the gate. A tired old minivan pulled up, making strange noises as if it might stop any second. 3 kids spilled out, asking where the bathroom was. Then a girl about 13 got out, and he stood shocked. She looked just like Faith did at that age, holding the hand of a small girl. Cindy came out last, looking nervous now that she was there. She took a deep breath and spoke. "I'm being honest here. I'm at my breaking point. Devon did the same to me as he tried to do to you, but he succeeded. He took the car and all the money he could grab and left. The only reason he couldn't take my rings is that they were still on my fingers. I was able to get them off and sell them, but I didn't think the gas would run out so fast, and it took every cent to get here." The little girl was crying, and the 13-year-old boldly asked Charley if they could have some food for the baby. He was shocked to learn they hadn't eaten anything since lunch the day before, and it was now dinner time. He led them to the kitchen. "I have cheese and crackers. Let them eat that. Give the little one some cereal. It will fill her up fast. Your mother and I will handle dinner." He was about to start smoking a pork loin for dinner. Instead, he sliced it and began grilling. One of his neighbors had given him a dozen ears of corn, so he put them on the grill too. He asked Cindy and Faith to make tea and lemonade. Cindy found some cabbage and made coleslaw. Faith microwaved some potatoes, and in about 45 minutes everything was ready. He felt angry at his cousin as he watched the kids eat hungrily, worried about when they would eat again. After they were all full, he walked down to the barn and made a phone call. There was a new sheriff in town. John Goines was a retired SBI agent with great credentials, but he struggled because he was a Democrat in a strong Republican area. Still, he managed to do surprisingly well against Sheriff Andy Rogers the first time. Perhaps in the next election, people would be ready for a change. 10 months before the election, Charley visited him. Straightforward, he asked if John planned to run for sheriff again. "I want to, but I'm not sure I will have enough support this year. Look me in the eyes, John. Tell me you are a good man, one who upholds the law fairly and wouldn't betray a friend. I'm your man, Charley. I don't want you to be just my man, John. I want you to be the man for the county. Please talk to the guys I brought with me and then get back to me. He got in his truck and left. The guys with him were campaign experts used to working on bigger elections. They guided John on what he needed to do. John reviewed the plan. This will take a lot of money. I'm not sure I can raise that. It's already handled. 4 different groups have made large donations and more will follow. Money is not your concern. Why is he doing this? If he wants someone to control, I'm not interested. He didn't say. All he wanted was for you to be sheriff. I've been doing this a long time. Don't question a good chance. I suspect it might be personal between Charley and Andy, but I won't ask unless it affects your election. Now, let's focus. Suddenly, billboards showing John's face appeared everywhere. Sheriff Andy wasn't worried. He had beaten John before. However, people he thought he could count on, even those who weren't Democrats, began supporting John. Andy still felt secure. He had a secret weapon, Charley Barton. Charley had invested a lot in Andy's last campaign and had personally talked to many voters, bringing them into his camp. This year might be tighter, but Andy felt confident. Nobody in their right mind would challenge Andy in the primary, which John won easily, beating his nearest rival by over 10,000 votes. Charley still hadn't made a public move. Worried, Andy decided to visit him. When he arrived, Charley was waiting for him on the porch. Andy was shocked to see kids playing in the side yard on a swing set that looked brand new. He had a small girl on his lap, gently rocking her on the swing, trying to help her fall asleep. A teen girl stood nearby, ready to take the child inside once she was asleep. Andy called the girl over. "She's out, Faith. Take her inside, and ask your mom to bring out a couple of glasses of tea, okay?" "Yes, sir, Charley," she said, smiling. Andy felt like he recognized Faith from somewhere. He sat down in another rocking chair and thanked the woman who came with the tea. She was a nice-looking woman, probably in her late 30s or early 40s. After she left, Andy grinned at Charley. "You old dog. She's a bit young for you, don't you think?" Charley frowned. "That's Devin's wife and kids. He left her alone, so she came back home. This is as far as she got. I took them in for a bit. But nothing's happening between us. I don't think she even likes me. What brings you here, Andy?" Andy took a sip of tea and smiled at how good it tasted. "If she cooks as well as she makes tea, you might want to keep her around." When Charley didn't react, Andy got to the point. "Johnny Goins is gaining a lot of support. He has serious backing now. It's time to step up, Charley. You need to talk to some of those guys and get them back on your side. And I need some money for the campaign. Those billboards and banners are expensive. Where did he find money for TV ads? They cost a fortune." Andy's use of bad words showed how worried he was. "I can tell you how to save a lot of money, Andy." "How's that?" "You can back out. When your term ends, you won't hold any public office here again." Andy was stunned. "How do you know this?" "I know it because I made it happen. Johnny will get my vote and my money. I'm even going to appear in TV ads with him. The total money I've given you for all your campaigns, I'm putting even more into this one." "You're finished, Sheriff Andy." Andy sat there, his glass of tea forgotten, staring at Charley. He was trying to understand what he had just heard. So many questions raced through his mind before a few finally came out. "Why would you do this? We've been friends for our whole lives. We were like brothers. We took the blame for each other to save one another. I was with you when you lost your innocence. We stood up for each other when we got married. 50 years of friendship, Charley. What did I do to deserve this?" One of the private investigators Charley hired to look into Rose had connections in the local police. He showed a cop a picture of Rose. The cop's response surprised him. "I know her. She's got a flower name. Iris? Daisy? No, Rose. I don't remember her last name. She stays at the towers. At first I thought she was working the streets since many guys like that older woman fantasy. But she seems like some kind of executive and she appears to have money. It seems like it's all just fun for her." Chuck asked when the cop had last seen her. "I've seen her the last couple of months, but she's always alone. She must have toned things down. I think she might be married. Maybe her husband found out about her fun." "Anyone before that?" The cop laughed. "Yeah, funny story. She was alone, dressed to get noticed. Dim lights hide a lot of wrinkles, you know? Anyway, about 50 cops from the area were there, letting off steam after a seminar. A few of them flirted with her, but I don't think any of them got anywhere. I was sitting with some sheriff telling stories. I pointed her out to him, and he jumped up like he sat on a tack. Soon she called his name, and he sat back down. After that, it was like they were the only two in the bar. It got so bad we had to tell them to either take it upstairs or take a break. They were in the elevator in 2 minutes. "So then," said Chuck, "it was a night of chance." Charlie turned off the little recorder and stared at him. Andy slumped back, looking pale. "Charlie, listen to me. It was one mistake. We never meant for it to happen. We woke up scared and promised to never hurt you or her again." "Please, Charlie, forgive me." "So it was just that one time, then? A drunken mistake, no plans to let it turn into something serious?" "That's right, Charlie held up his hand and started the recorder again, continuing from where he stopped. The investigator's voice continued. "So it was a one-time hookup?" The cop laughed. "No way! He didn't leave her sweet all weekend. He even stayed an extra day and had the deputy he brought with him stay the last night. I don't know if he was part of it or just there to help explain an extra hotel charge to the county manager. His name was Wilson, Warren, maybe Williams, I can't remember. He was big, like 6'5" or taller." Andy slumped further, his face pale. He tried to speak, but Charlie stopped him. "I don't care how it happened. She probably made a move on you, but Andy, you were my best friend. Even drunk, you had to know better. You knew how I would react if I ever found out, yet you did it anyway all weekend long. We're done, Andy. Don't come here again. Do not speak to me again unless it's for work. Go home and think about what you will do when you're no longer sheriff. You'll never get a job in this county again. Just think about what you'll tell Margaret if everyone finds out about your bad weekend. What will people think of you then? Face it, Andy, your career is over. Just leave quietly and keep some of your dignity. Now go. We're finished here." Andy stumbled off the porch and sat in his police car for a minute. Then he drove down the driveway one last time. Cindy walked around the porch with a pitcher of tea. Was the sheriff crying when he left? "It was probably just dust," Grace, the 3-year-old, said as she walked out behind Cindy. She tapped her mother's leg to get her attention. "Charlie, hug?" He laughed and picked her up, then moved over to make room for Cindy on the swing. "Don't sit too close, Charlie. We'll be leaving soon." Charlie smiled. "You keep saying that. But here we are. What are you doing with the money you're getting from housekeeping? I know you already got the kids registered at school with this address." Cindy felt a bit angry. "If I had enough money, we would leave now. You've got us stuck here, just like Devin did." This hit him hard after a long day. He got up from the swing and went inside the house. 5 minutes later, he returned with a check and handed it to her. She looked shocked. It was made out to her for $5,000. "Take this check to the Jeep dealership on the way to the bank. I told Vic to look for a good used car for you. Just take whatever he offers. Everything will be handled. Use this money to get settled. You can start at the store next Monday. It won't be a lot, but you can manage, and the kids will get free daycare. Do you think you can leave by Friday?" Cindy was taken aback. This was a response she didn't expect. She thought she could give him a little shake-up to get him to pay more attention to her. While she was thinking about what to say, she heard a small cry and turned to see her daughter, Faith. Charlie had reacted when he met her, causing her to smile. "Yeah, I took her name because I liked it. I thought it meant something good for my future. But I got that all wrong." Faith and Grace had really grown close to him. They were both at the age where a father figure was very important, she thought. Charlie even took Faith to visit his own daughter sometimes. A few weeks after finding out about his house guests, Faith came out and grinned when she met the newest Faith. She remarked that the baby looked a lot like her when she was young and even showed her an old photo album. "To avoid confusion, I'll call you Faith Jr. when I'm around, okay?" As time went on, everyone just called her Junior, and she always smiled when someone said it. She was excited that the clinic where Faith Sr. worked promised her a part-time job next summer when she was old enough to work legally. Cindy turned back to Charlie, her voice softening. "It doesn't have to happen right now, Charlie. We can take our time." "No, you might be right. I was getting too attached. It will only make it harder when you leave." By the way, I told Hope and the twins that we would go fishing today. Maybe we can catch enough for a fish fry tomorrow. I need to go get everything ready." He left Cindy sitting on the swing. She put her head in her hands, listening to Faith making noise in the kitchen. Hope was her 11-year-old daughter, and the twin boys were 9-year-olds named Jack and Jesse. Charley had taken them into town and bought them simple fishing rods and a tackle box. They drove down to the lake he had built years ago, now owned by Faith. The kids watched their corks carefully as they fished. Faith Sr. returned from the house with a cooler filled with water and drinks, plus some folding chairs for the adults. The only one who got to sit and relax was Cindy, while both Charlies were busy baiting hooks and helping the kids catch fish. They stayed for 2 hours and caught more than enough fish for the fry. The twins teased Hope for not catching as many fish, claiming girls weren't good at fishing. But then, as she reeled in her line, Hope's rod bent deeply. After 20 minutes of anxious coaching from both Charlies, she landed an 8-pound catfish, which was much bigger than anything the boys had caught. Faith filmed the whole thing on her phone. Faith Sr. declared that since the kids had done all the work, they would have the fish fry at her house on the patio. She noticed her father flinch, so she took him aside. "It's time to let go of the past, Dad. We need to make some new memories. Bring everyone over tomorrow and let them have fun on the patio. One day you'll look back and remember things like when Jesse ate too much ice cream and got sick, or when you watched your first grandbaby take their first steps." He smiled, but then became serious. "That's a nice thought, but they will be leaving soon. It's for the best. She's a young woman. She needs to find a man her age. I shouldn't hold her back." Faith playfully swung at his head, and Charley stepped back, barely stopping the slap that landed on his arm. "What was that for?" "For being silly, that's why. They talk to me, you know. Cindy has even called asking about your favorite foods. Have you noticed how good your meals always are? Junior has shared some things about their life, and Devin was not a good husband or father." They were feeling hopeless until they found themselves in the driveway of a man who needed their help just as much as they needed his. It was time to move on. They had to let go of the past and look forward to the future. "Dad, you always wanted a big family, and now you have one. You wouldn't want to upset God by turning away his gift, would you?" He paused, surprised by what he heard. Faith nudged him gently toward the door. "Go on, take the kids home and get them ready. We'll clean the fish and prepare for dinner. And Dad, I want everyone there, you got that? Even Cindy. If you have to, tie her up and throw her in the truck." She cuddled close, just like when she was a little girl. "Daddy, I've got a surprise for you tomorrow. I hope you'll like it." He gathered the kids into the truck, curious about the surprise all the way home. Once they got home, the kids excitedly shared stories of their fun and the fish they caught. Hope smirked a little when they showed off a catfish on Charlie's phone. The boys argued about who caught more crappie, but Hope just smiled and let it go. After baths and dinner, the kids fell asleep. Cindy cuddled with Grace and then went off to find Charley, who was sitting on the porch swing, his favorite spot. "Charley, can I talk to you?" He patted the seat next to him, and she sat close, on purpose, of course. "Listen, Charley, I want to tell you some things. I loved Devin, but he was not a good husband or a father. You've given my kids more love and attention in just 6 months than he did in all the time I was with him. When the cousins found out he was not being honest, you helped fix it. You were smart about it, getting him a loan from the bank with low payments that would last a long time. But then he was ungrateful and ran away, leaving the kids with no money. I'm just glad you got his part of the farm instead of a stranger." Charley opened his mouth to say something, but she stopped him. "Wait, let me finish. It's hard for me to say this. If you interrupt, I might get scared and stop. As things got worse, I started wishing to come back home. Do you think it was a mistake that I came here first? Of everyone I know, you were the one I thought would help me. You were everything I hoped for, kind and caring to the kids. I know I was a bit difficult at first, but I had been through so much. I was ashamed to depend on your kindness. When I said I needed a job, you started paying me to help around the house. That didn't feel fair. You are the cleanest person I know. Taking care of you was nothing compared to looking after 5 kids. She held his hand tightly. Somewhere along the way, I saw that there are still really good men in this world. and I realized I was living with one of the best. I watched you with grace and faith, how you answered her endless questions, how you built up Hope's self-esteem, and how you treated the boys. Those kids would be heartbroken if I took them away from you." She paused, knowing this next part would be tough. She had faced a lot of hurt in the past, and if he turned her down now, it might crush her. And as I watched you, I realized I want them to be with you for as long as I can, because that's how long I want to be with you. I love you, Charley. Did you hear me? I love you, not just as a father figure to my children, but as a woman loves her partner. I'm not your ex. When I love, I put my whole heart into it. I'm asking you to let us stay with you until you decide if we have a future together." She took a breath. "And one more thing. I don't care about the age gap. I'm 40, you're 59. It doesn't matter. And I don't want your money. Keep it all. Give it to Faith if that's what you want. Our life together will be enough." Connie leaned into him, feeling nervous as she waited. Charley sat quietly for a while, making her even more anxious. "If that's true, why were you so eager to move out?" he finally asked. "Oh, Charley, it broke my heart when you gave me that check. I didn't want to leave. I wanted you to ask me to stay. I have low confidence, remember? I was hoping you would make a move. That's why I'm here now, to fix my mistake." He looked at her, frowning, and for a moment she thought she had lost him, but then he leaned down and kissed her. It took her a second to realize what was happening, then she kissed him back. He pulled away, smiling. "You're lucky you're so pretty because you're not the smartest." Wait, he thought she was pretty. Did he just call her dumb? He continued before she could respond. "Didn't you ever think to just tell me how you feel? I've had feelings for you for a while, but the age difference held me back. Look at how much time we've wasted. If he thinks he can call me dumb and get away with it... Wait, he feels the same way? I love this man." They sat on the couch kissing until a light in the kitchen turned on. One of the kids was up, maybe looking for a snack. Connie jumped up, quickly kissing his forehead. "This isn't over," she whispered as she slipped inside. He playfully swatted her on the back, still smiling. "It certainly isn't, little girl." "Humph," she thought. "I'll show him who the little girl is." The next day, the kids were stunned when Cindy hopped into Charley's lap and gave him a kiss at breakfast. Hope and Faith exchanged knowing glances, ready to explain things to the twins later. "Kids, your mom and I need to go into town for about an hour. Be good for Faith. If not, no fish fry for any of us. Got it?" The kids nodded happily, and off they went. When they arrived at the car dealership, Charley told her to pick a new vehicle, something suitable for their family. "I thought I was getting a used one." "Used is for temporary. New means it stays. Got it?" "Stays? That means—" She wrapped her arms around him and kissed him. The sales manager smiled, thinking about all the fun this news would bring to the diner. It seemed like Charley had finally settled down. 90 minutes later, Connie was driving home in her new van. Home! What a nice thought. The kids jumped out to check out their new vehicle, climbing over it in excitement. When they pulled up, Faith smiled. It looked like Dad could still learn new tricks. She hugged and kissed all the kids, including Grace, who was cuddled up with Charley. "Connie Jr., can you help me get everything ready?" T.Y., the nickname for her son, which stood for the younger, has been cooking for a while. We should have enough to eat now. It was a lovely afternoon. They ate and relaxed. Faith had set up the badminton net, and she and Junior played against Hope and Charley T.Y. The boys discovered the horseshoe pits, and Charley Sr. showed them how to play, then left to kick a few colorful balls around with Connie and Grace. As it got late, Junior pulled out an overnight bag. Looks like she and Grace were having a sleepover. Hope and the boys were tired, and after their baths, they quickly fell asleep. Charley and Connie ended up on the porch swing sharing kisses and laughter. Ugh, if it weren't for the kids. Connie laughed and interrupted him. "What about the kids? If we do this, you're never getting away from me. They'll eventually hear us. I still want a bit of privacy." "Well, dear, unless you know a place we can go, we'll have to be patient." Charley looked towards the yard, feeling frustrated, as the moonlight broke through the clouds and shone on the barn. "Come on," he said, grabbing her with one hand and taking the old blanket with the other. Connie giggled as they reached the door. Really, Charlie, the barn loft? Are we teenagers hiding from our parents? No, sweetie, we're two adults trying to sneak away from our kids. Now hurry up that ladder. She was halfway up when she felt his hand slip beneath her dress. He had managed to take off her underwear while they were on the swing. She squealed, "Charlie, stop that, I might fall." "Oh, that feels nice, just a bit more." "Yes, oh my." She laughed down at him. "Serves you right. Better watch your step on the way up. Come on, slowpoke, or I'll start without you." Just as he reached the top, her dress flew over his face. When he got it out of the way, she was on the blanket, bathed in moonlight. He stopped to admire her when she called out, "I started without you. Come here, old man. Let's see what you can do before you faint." She gasped when she felt a rush of excitement. Maybe sneaking into the loft wasn't a bad idea. The kids would have been knocking on the door any second. She felt joy with each moment they shared. Rose felt old and lonely. She was probably making a good living, just like Charlie, but money had never mattered to him. He only cared about providing for those he loved. In the last 5 years, she had met many lovers. They were all different ages, including a 19-year-old with great energy. The passion was thrilling, but afterward, she always felt empty. They rarely stayed the night, and when they left, she'd curl up alone, wishing for someone to hold her close all night. Andy called her after his argument with Charlie. She felt little sympathy. "You should have left right after we were together. You wanted the weekend, not me. If Charlie finds out about your deputy, you're in trouble. I can't believe you talked me into that." The call went downhill from there. It made her think of Charlie again. She had only seen him 3 times in 4 years, twice at funerals and once in a restaurant at one of his stores. She thought about going over to him, but he was with another woman, and it was clear their lunch was more than just business. A wave of jealousy washed over her. She reminded herself that he wasn't hers anymore. She had to let go of those dreams. Quietly, she slipped away, leaving money for her unfinished meal. Rose approached him at the second funeral, chatting about Faith until they were alone. "Charlie, remember that offer I made you ages ago? It's time to talk about it." He looked troubled. "Yes, I remember. I'm sorry, Rose, but I can't accept. It's too complicated for me to deal with. I hope you have a nice life. We'll see each other now and then since we need to think about our daughter's future. Excuse me, I have to go." She watched him walk away and her heart broke all over again. He still looked good and stayed fit. If anything, he was a bit thinner and it suited him well. She thought back and realized how foolish she had been. She was spending the night with her daughter, Faith, which she did often when she was in town. That evening, she met Charlie T.Y. right away. She could tell from Faith's eyes that this was going to be her future son-in-law. She liked him a lot before she realized why. He was a lot like her Charlie, sharing almost all the same views on everything. Rose and Faith had fixed their past issues. They still enjoyed their yearly shopping trips together. They weren't quite as fun because Faith was very careful about what she wore, except when it came to lingerie. Rose picked out some lovely pieces and wished they had existed when she and Charlie were younger. Maybe then he wouldn't have aged so fast. She knew Faith was picking some out for her Charlie. Rose commented on one. "That's beautiful, but it doesn't look comfortable for long." "Mom!" Faith giggled. "These things aren't meant to be worn for long. They're meant to be looked at and taken off quickly. If my Charlie leaves anything like this on me for more than 5 minutes, I just throw it away." Rose smiled, remembering when some choices of hers had been ripped off and never discussed again. That night, Rose woke from a light sleep, thinking about a dream she had of her and Charlie in a hayloft. Feeling bold, she quietly got out of bed, put on the fanciest outfit she had with her, and left the house. Soon, she was at the entrance to Charlie's driveway and was surprised that the gate was still open. Everyone was so tired, and after Charlie had 4 beers, Connie had driven and forgotten to close it. Rose parked behind the barn, trying to think of a plan as she walked to the door. Halfway there, she stopped. What was that noise? Then she heard voices. "Charlie, you naughty old man, stop! I'm not on birth control, I could get pregnant. Charlie, please!" The last word came out as a wail, followed by a gasp. Rose could hear the heavy breathing as they caught their breath. "If I get pregnant, I'll—" Rose heard Charlie laugh. If you're pregnant, we'll name him Junior and love him just like we love our other kids. I hope you are pregnant. I think we should do this again to make sure. Are you in? Connie reached for him, laughing. What if it's a girl? It's a boy. I can feel it. And if it's a girl, do you think Faith the Third is too much? Oh, Charlie, that feels great. Let's talk about... Rose turned away, tears filling her eyes. Her dream shattered. She drove home, leaving early the next morning without saying why. 2 years later, she met Freddie, who was 6 years older but looked great for his age. They got along well and spent time together. She enjoyed herself but kept it separate from him. When he asked her to marry him, she said no and told him all about her past and present. She was shocked by his response. I'm impotent, Rose. I have been for 5 years. There are no treatments to help, and I've looked into everything. So if we marry, it will be for love and friendship. You can feel free to have other relationships as long as it's discreet and away from home, if you always come back to me. Rose was shocked but agreed. She introduced him to Faith and Charley, relieved that they liked him. They attended a small wedding and wished her well. Charley even sent a special gift, a cruise along European rivers, first-class tickets in the honeymoon suite. It was one of the things she and Charley had talked about when they were young, but never did. For 2 more years, Rose had a few flings, no more than twice a year, until she lost interest in sex. She and Freddie, inspired by Charley's gift, took a world cruise with many adventures until Freddie began to have health issues. He passed away when Rose was 70. She sold her business when they married and put half the money in a trust for Faith. When Faith learned how much was in the trust, she was shocked. For a moment, she thought about refusing it, but then she felt a kick from her baby, a girl this time. She decided to keep it for her children. When Rose passed away at 75, Faith inherited everything, including Freddie's estate, which was twice the size of what Rose had. Freddie left a letter for Faith. I never had children, but I always wished I could thank your father for raising such a wonderful child. He taught you well. The way you accepted me, even calling me your child's other grandfather, made me realize what I missed by not having kids. So take the money, my daughter, for all the love you gave me. Suddenly, Charley T.Y. was with the richest woman in the state. Does this mean we can have more kids? They ended up with 5. Charley looked at his beautiful bride and quietly laughed to himself at the guests there, having just been at another wedding a few weeks earlier. During a moment alone at the fish fry, Faith seemed nervous. Dad, remember we talked about new memories on the patio, how I wanted to watch your grandchild take their first steps? In 7 months, we'll know if it's a boy or girl. So, think about it. 18 to 20 months from now, we'll see that very thing. She leaned back, waiting for his reaction. Charley sat back, stunned. He felt overwhelmed. First, he had found a new partner, and second, one of his biggest dreams was coming true. He couldn't hold back his tears. It was the first time in his life he cried from happiness. Immediately, his family gathered around him. Junior and Grace jumped onto his lap. The other kids, even the boys, were crying, feeling scared. But when the big news was out, smiles filled the room like sunshine, and everyone hugged Faith. The 2 Charlies came together. You know this means a big wedding, right? T.Y. sighed. I know, but it will just be a simple ceremony. We got married in a quick civil ceremony when we found out. It felt right. Charley Sr. smiled, proud of his daughter's choice. Just a heads up. Her mother has been planning this since she saw the baby picture and knew it was a girl. Rose was so happy about it, but she tried to calm herself. Still, 5 weeks later, the little Baptist church was filled with people as Charley and Faith renewed their vows. Because there were so many guests, the party had to be held at the Civic Auditorium. Rose felt proud of Charley when the preacher asked, "Who gives this woman in marriage?" And Charley answered loudly, "Her mother and I do." Connie stayed in the background with her kids, but she watched Charley with Faith and the children, and a bittersweet smile crossed her face. It seemed like Charley got the big family he always wanted, just not with her. Putting aside her feelings, she mingled with others. She forgot the troubles of the past, and people she hadn't seen in years came up to her. It was interesting that while Sheriff Andy's daughter was a bridesmaid, he didn't come to the wedding. Her mother was there, and Rose made sure they never got too close. Connie frowned when she noticed Amanda Williams and Carla Bishop were also bridesmaids, but it looked like they were unaware of the tension. 4 weeks later, Connie rushed into the living room holding a piece of paper. The kids followed her quickly as Charley laughed at her. "You crazy old man! I told you this would happen, you jerk! I'll be 40 and pregnant! What will we do?" She collapsed into his arms, crying. He lifted her head and kissed her. "It means we're going to do what we talked about in the barn. We'll raise this baby with love, just like we do with all our kids, okay? And yes, it looks like I have to marry you now. What a burden." He dramatically sighed. "When the baby arrives, you'll be the one changing diapers and dealing with teething. And you'll be a sports dad, but don't worry. Our other kids will help you out. By then you'll be well trained. And how do you know I'll marry you? I think we should put it to a vote in the family, and you are not included. Kids, how many of you think I should marry this crazy lady? Can you handle him while growing up? I know he is a bit older, but he is still in pretty good shape. If we keep an eye on him, he might be around for a while. What do you think?" She counted the raised hands. "Looks like everyone is on my side. So, old man, you're stuck with us. No turning back now." "Wait!" shouted Faith. "It's not official yet. You haven't even asked. And I don't see a ring. Really, Dad? This is how you want to start?" Hope giggled, copying Faith. "Yeah, really, Dad?" Grace, confused, followed her sisters. "Really, Dad?" Charley laughed hard, stood up, and playfully dropped Connie onto the floor. "Boys, help your poor pregnant mother up. The girls and I need to go shopping." Soon, Charley and the girls, including Grace, headed to the jewelry store. The shop owner, Jack, recognized Charley and was surprised to see him with all girls. He was even more shocked when he found out why they were there. "Jack, what do you have for engagement and wedding rings?" "I have a nice choice, Charley. Who are they for?" Charley looked surprised by the question. "They're for me, Jack. Or rather, they're for the woman I want to marry. Now let's see what you have." They looked at many beautiful rings. The girls even tried a few on, and Faith found out she was the same size as Connie. Finally, they chose a lovely set, one of the most expensive. Then Charley did something that surprised Jack again. "Do you have matching bands for the girls? I'm not just marrying her. I'm marrying the whole family." He turned to the girls. "Would you like that? You can wear them on your pinky and know you're part of a loving family." Cheers erupted, waking Grace from her nap. A saleswoman helped him find a tiny ring just for her. Grace cooed as she looked at it on her small finger. When Charley tried to take it off, she held her fist tightly. They left the store, wearing their rings on their pinkies and carrying a wrapped box. The jeweler watched as they went into a local steakhouse and then turned the sign on his door to closed. It was 11:30. He looked at the surprised saleswoman. "So, what are we having for lunch? The diner or the sub shop? Do you want someone else to tell the world that the old silver fox finally got caught?" She grabbed her purse. "I'll take the sub shop, you take the diner. I probably won't be back until 1:30. Jack nodded. "Good idea. See you then." They exited, each going in different directions, almost running. By the end of that day, almost everyone knew about the engagement. Charley and the girls enjoyed their meal and the many looks they got. Someone dashed out of the sub shop and hurried inside to tell others. Soon the whole restaurant was buzzing with excitement. Finally, one of the oldest ladies in the room, who had been his babysitter and taught him to play piano, approached him. "Is it true, Charley?" He thought about teasing her, but decided to let her have this moment. "Yes, it is, Mabel. Let me introduce my daughters. This is Faith, this is Hope, and the little one is Grace. They will all need lessons. Do you think you have room for them? I also have a couple of boys, but I'm not sure if they are interested. I'll call you later. Now, Mabel, it's time to take my girls home. See you soon." Charley thought it was amazing how fast a 76-year-old woman who was supposed to have arthritis moved as she rushed to her friends. One thing became clear as they drove down the road. In all the excitement, no one asked who he was marrying. That sure would surprise them. Connie and the boys were waiting on the porch. As soon as he stopped, Connie began to speak. "Listen, just because you buy a ring doesn't mean I'll like it. I might not want— Oh my, that's so pretty." Charley dropped to one knee. "It's yours, little girl, as soon as you say yes. Connie, will you marry me?" "Yes!" Her shout was so loud that horses 2 farms away jumped at the sound. Suddenly, she was in his lap, crying with joy. Once she calmed down, the girls showed her their rings, and she started crying again. Then they walked down the aisle together. Grace was the flower girl, smiling in her satin dress as she scattered flowers. Faith stood with Connie, while Junior and Hope looked great. Charley felt a little tug as he looked at them, remembering what Faith had said before. T.Y. stood with him, and the twins looked a bit uneasy in their suits. Everything went as planned until it was time for him to kiss the bride. Just as they finished, he felt a pull on his pants. "Kiss me too, Daddy," said Grace. The crowd laughed as he picked her up and shared a kiss with her mother. They spent their honeymoon on a beautiful beach with soft sand and lovely evenings together. They made special memories, tried snorkeling and enjoyed it, but weren't so fond of parasailing. A week later, they returned home to pick up their kids from Faith, showing them pictures of their trip, and they promised a family vacation before school started. The ultrasound showed they were having a boy, and Charley smiled. Connie called him a selfish old man, while he called her his little girl and playfully patted her. It made the nurse giggle and made Connie even madder. She complained at him all the way to the truck, but then felt bad and started to tease him instead. They both agreed that teasing was much more fun. Charley Jr. was born without any problems and was healthy. They had worried a little because of their ages, but decided they'd love him no matter what. As the years went by, Faith had fun introducing them. "Hi, I'm Faith. This is my sister, also named Faith. This is my husband Charley, my father Charley, and my brother Charley. We aren't very creative with names." Faith Sr. named her two daughters Rose and Constance after her mother and stepmother. This helped with the name confusion. As Charley looked back on his children near the end of his life, he realized that Faith Jr. was the one he felt closest to. She had worked for her sister one season, but then decided that she didn't like sick animals. Instead, she loved the clinic cat, a regal cat named Lady Gray. Though she only had 3 legs, she moved gracefully. Faith Sr. said there was a story about the cat, but Faith Jr. wasn't old enough to hear it yet. So, after school and during summers, Faith Jr. spent time with her dad. She worked part-time at the garden center and learned about the hardware business. She was doing so well in school that she would graduate at 17 and had already been accepted into 4 great colleges with business programs. She would one day take over from him. Hope turned out to have a talent for plants. At 13, she convinced Charley to buy her a tiller and give her a piece of land to plant, which grew a lot of the family's food. Then she got him to adopt a rare breed of sheep as part of a conservation effort. This led to the boys joining in, and together they built a respected breeding program. Charley bought Hope a small tractor and hired a cousin to teach her how to use it safely. He even started letting her store her hay in his barn. Now 17, she smiled at him while they stacked it in the loft with the boys helping below. She preferred small bales instead of large, round ones. "Now, Dad, I'm going to feed this to my animals, so no breaking the bales, okay?" Charley just smiled, knowing they would share some fun moments up the ladder later. Little Grace wasn't so little anymore. Now 10 years old, she looked just like her mother. Charley worried about Hope and Junior dating, thinking he needed more shotguns. Grace was a piano genius, playing difficult pieces that no one else in the area could. One school, 4 states away, wanted her to live there while she studied, but she refused. Instead, she agreed to spend half of her summers there. Charley knew that as she grew more confident, it wouldn't be long before she moved away. He hated the thought, but he wouldn't hold her back from her talent. That just left Junior, who was still very young. He knew he would enjoy having kids around for the rest of his life. With the money he had saved, the kids would be taken care of, but he put it into trust funds for them with rules. They had to graduate from college. If they didn't, it would add 5 more years before they could access the money. They also had to work and live on their own for 2 years before the funds would be available. He felt sorry for Faith Sr. about having to lower her inheritance. She laughed and said her mother would cover any missing money. She didn't want to take anything away from her brothers and sisters. Years later, the truth came out after Sheriff Andy lost his job and his wife left him. He found work with a private detective 2 states away, making good money, but when he had to start paying alimony, things got tougher. A few years later, he remarried, but after 4 years, he found out she was being unfaithful. It happened by chance while he was looking into someone else's cheating. Her lover turned out to be Andy's wife. This led to a divorce, and he never married again. When Amanda learned about it, she divorced him too, not only because of that affair, but also because she caught him cheating again, this time with a woman who worked in the district attorney's office. When their personal relationship affected a case, the new sheriff fired Andy. Strangely enough, a year later, Amanda began dating John. He was 12 years older than her. One day she caught Charley having lunch and told him about it with a smile. Apparently, older guys are much more reliable. They got married when she was 38 and he was 50. Carla and her husband stayed together until he passed away 48 years later. She never remarried. Carla retired as chief detective and came back 2 years later to become sheriff after John retired. She won the election and served 2 terms before retiring for good. Charley died 2 months after turning 79, just 4 weeks after his youngest son graduated high school. Cindy never remarried and joined him 15 years later, resting beside him in the Baptist cemetery. Rose chose to be cremated. Her ashes were combined with Fred's and scattered into the ocean at one of their favorite vacation spots. When Charley died, they had to hold the funeral at the local high school football stadium. 800 people tried to carry his casket, and they had to draw names to pick who would. The rest formed a volunteer honor guard. He was taken to the burial site in a horse-drawn hearse, pulled by marsh ponies raised by Hope. Sheriff Carla led the procession. There was an unofficial list that showed Charley helped around 1,000 kids get a college education. This didn't even count the many Bartonians he supported. At his funeral, 7 members of Congress, 2 governors, and many local officials attended. There were also 5 FBI agents, 29 police officers, and a mix of teachers, lawyers, scientists, and business people who owed so much to his kindness. Several movie and television stars were there too, all because of Charley. His harshness toward his enemies was never revealed. Few would believe it, and those secrets were well kept. Bobby Peterson woke up with a terrible headache and holding his nose, groaning. It was his gift for arriving in prison, just as Charley had promised. He couldn't believe the judge gave him a sentence that meant he wouldn't be eligible for parole for 12 years. They even added 18 months because he had hurt a cat when he threw it. He thought the punishment was unfair. Things got worse when he found out he would be in Rockwell, a medium-security prison known for its bad reputation. After being there for just 12 hours, his nose was broken. He spent another day in the infirmary before getting a cell. The man in his cell was massive, 6 feet 8 inches tall and 300 pounds of muscle. When the guards left, he cornered Bobby. "Here's the deal. Someone I'll never know is making sure my mom gets health care and a nice place to live as long as I keep you in line. So listen carefully. You're mine until I leave. You do what I say, when I say it, and you don't talk back. If you do, it's going to be very bad for you. I can hurt you without even touching your face. You'll grow your hair long, and one of the older inmates will help you learn how to use makeup. If you're going to be mine, you need to look the part. Now take off those clothes and crawl over here. Show me how special you are." Bobby cried softly as he took off his clothes and crawled over. Charley was right. With his broken nose, he almost passed out from not breathing well. In 6 months, Bobby looked so much like a woman that other inmates fought over him. His daddy let others use him now and then, and the inmates made a game of tattooing their gang signs on his body. By the 5th year, he was covered in tattoos with no more room for new ones. He had a new daddy by then, who had some kind of deal outside that kept him safe. This new daddy was more gentle, didn't want to share him, and Bobby, stuck there with that thinking, fell in love. He cried when his daddy left. After 3 months of being traded like a toy with his new daddy, he was released early for good behavior. His father had stopped visiting him after 6 years, and there was no one to greet him when he got out. As the crowd thinned, he saw his favorite prison daddy waiting for him. He ran into his arms and he took Bobby home. He got him small implants, had his eyebrows shaped, and made him wear tight clothes to show off his body. Bobby ended up working at a makeup counter while his daddy fixed motorcycles, and a year later, they got married. So, in a way, no matter what Charley put him through, he found his own kind of happiness in the end. Bobby learned about Charley passing away from the news, which reported on the funeral due to the important people who attended. But it didn't bother him much. After all, their second child was teething and having a tough time. He took care of him, gently talking and feeding him ice chips until he fell asleep. Strangely, his name was Charley. Hey, audience! If you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.